let's go ahead and get started, guys. I'm still trying to set a couple things up, so we'll just chat a little bit while we're doing that. Uh, yeah. Hi. How are you doing? Are you doing all right? Doing okay. For the weekend, start of the weekend. Just trying to get this set up, and then we'll get right into the stream. I was trying to think about what to do specifically kind of today, and I was kind of like, oh, I'm not sure. I didn't have as much time to focus on as I wanted to this week. Actually, throughout the week, I started thinking about, oh, what's something I want to talk about on stream this week, and just time and energy kind of got sucked up in other places, and I just kind of ended up being a little bit lower on the priority totem pole and not quite getting there. So, really had to kind of spur the last moment figure out what we're going to talk about today, which is okay. That's not bad. Often, sometimes that's even better than something that I really laboriously like plan out and prep. So it just kind of depends. It's six in one hand, half dozen in the other. It's just a thing that happens. So this is going to be one of our less planned ones. So instead, what we're going to do is actually take a look at uh, sort of best and worst D&D player and dungeon master habits. I thought that would be an interesting one. It really what came. There was a very specific instance in the game that I was running last night that made me think about it. I was like, oh, that would be an alright topic. So let's go ahead and jump in and do that. And then took just sort of a minor look at a couple of other lists, kind of what the top ones are, because I'm not necessarily want to highlight my top ones, but take a list of what other people have said, sort of top best and worst player habits. I've got these headphones just tickling my nose just right, and, and take a look at that, and then talk about them, and then bring what personal experiences I've had with things like that, and bring that up. We'll talk about it from sort of that aspect instead. All right, let's get this done. I just grab grab our URL. I'm gonna share it online. In case somebody else wants to come and join us. Otherwise, we'll get started. We're then worst. I know you can't see what I'm writing and typing, but I'm typing something. Player and habits. DB. Yeah, that's fine. That shall suffice. Doesn't always have to be super pithy. Sometimes it's just talking about the information, trying to get it out there. Ba-bing, ba-boom. Go. And there's that done. And let's do this one. There we go. We'll do that. Knock that out. Alright, I think that's pretty much everything. I don't need this anymore. And we're gonna type this. Alright, well I gotta use it. Alright. Ah! Here we go. Now we're cooking with gas. King of the Hill style, which is apparently coming back. I did not. It's tough watching things sort of getting to the age where you see a bunch of stuff resurrected from your own youth and nostalgia, and it's like, do we really need more King of the Hill? No. I like King of the Hill. I like King of the Hill a lot, especially as somebody who grew up probably closer to that sort of environment with King of the Hill. Um, there is both a too close for comfort and both something that feels very homey about the show. But that said, I don't really like doing resurrections of super old series, like to do one last sort of victory lap. Um, I never feel like it really recaptures the magic of what made the original kind of special. Maybe that's just me though. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? Maybe you feel totally differently about that. But those are sort of my thoughts about it, anyways. And presumably you somewhat interested in my thoughts if you are watching this. Presumably. You don't have to be. fact, it's probably better for engagement if I bait you guys. King of the Hill is the worst show in the world, and here's why. So, 10 reasons why. I don't have 10 reasons. I think it's fine, Joe. All right. I think we should be good. I don't think I need to do anything else. So we can hop kind of like right into it a little bit, and pull this guy up. Let me do this. Oh, let's do it. Oh, try to not get totally blown out. Try not to get completely. Come on, look at the settings. Blown out by the white of my computer monitor because I'm staring at that blank page. Which I can go ahead and share with you. Go ahead and do that. Here we go to workspace. And we're gonna get the window capture. There we go. That's not the right one. Oh, there it is. This is the white page I'm staring at. What I'm trying to do is there we go. You really have to kind of go looking for it. Trying not to blow myself too much out with it. Just gonna make it just a little soft. A little softer, so it's not a little bit more yellow, so it kind of matches the other light I've got in here. All right, let's get to it. Actually, you know what? Before we fully jump into this, well, there's one other thing to look at. So I figure one of the first things. Well, do I want to do that? Do I want to do that or not? This is the problem when I don't prep beforehand. Do I want to do that first or not? Uh, yeah, and I think it would be fun, just because this was kind of a different session. So I did want to show just sort of the prep for our last session that I just ran yesterday, and that will probably continue to be my prep at least for the next session, if not the session after that, kind of depending on what the players do. But let me get in there. Let me get in there. All right. Um, I need my Friday night campaign. There's just a prep. There we go. So obviously, if you are a player in the game, maybe don't watch this first a little bit. We're just gonna talk about it real quick, just because I want to show off what prep kind of looks like for a session that I did that I just was more like town time, downtime, just kind of futzing around. They just gotten back to town after their adventure, after they have dispatched the growth and plundered the strange tomb from the cult of Okeanos. I guess it's not technically a tomb, just underground facility complex, I guess. Base, probably the right word. Base. Staging area, maybe. They are not super sure, the players are not super sure as to what the purpose of that facility is. A lot of them think it is a temple of some type, even though there's places to worship in it, but it's not fully a temple. Doesn't matter. And that's why I didn't try to correct them on it, because it's not particularly important, but it is. But let me share this now, and now we should be able to see it. Hey, there we go. I'm just gonna go ahead and fit that, make it a little bit wider so we can see it. So this is what it looks like. So now we have this. Everybody's here except for Sniz. We do that. We have our weather, which we haven't really needed to update, because the only person who is sort of interested in the weather in the game is Sniz as the druid of the group, but they are sort of fully out of the game at the moment. They've got a big scheduling conflict, I think I've talked about before. So we don't know when they're going to be able to come back, and when they do, they're probably going to only be able to come back maybe every other session. So they're Sniz has very much been sidebarred. They're on the sort of buffet side table on the side of the room as far as D&D is concerned. So if they show up, great, you get an extra person in your party to help out with some uh, combats and to do some cool druid stuff. But we are not going to focus on Sniz very much as a player, as a character in the world, just because I can. So they're back to town. I told them that they were going to have a few days of downtime and have a list of some things that they wanted to do. We're doing a very classic AM PM split as for what they can do in the day, and they'll have a few days, and then there's a big festival that's happening, a spring equinox festival that's happening And this has been leading up since the very, very beginning of the campaign, which now we are 16 sessions in, which you see at the top. And because I'm a very tough DM sometimes, they are now officially level 2. This is our first session of being level 2. That's right, it's 15 sessions of being level 1, which I'm sure this will have some players clutching at their pearls. But I like low level play, and I told them very upfrontly when we were making the campaign is that your level ups are dependent on the things that you do in the world, and when you do basically book in some sort of plot line or storyline or adventure, do that. They watched very hard on the first dungeon, which was in like session 3 or 4 or something like that, and then went a whole bunch of sessions without picking up another sort of larger adventure thread. So they didn't do anything worthy of kind of a level up. But they have now, and now they're here. So this is just sort of how I set up the session notes, or I'm doing it right now. So we've got this in the background, just so I know if I want to talk about stuff that's happening in the world. The common folk are busy planting spring grain. It's the last week of their first month of spring, and then we're going to go straight into the high spring festival, which is coming up in just a few days, which is the spring equinox, like I said. And so it's got a lot of very sort of Easter, May Day, spring, fertility, ritual kind of stuff. It's a season of rebirth and fertility. And this particular one is focused primarily on the Naiad, which is one of the gods. The gods play religion plays a pretty large faction. It's very important in this world. Like most people are very religious, and it's a worship is a true pantheon. None of that stuff's too important, but Naiad is one of the gods, and they are the focus on the sea and lovers and things like that. So this is very much a lovers' holiday. So it's kind of a Valentine's Day mixed with kind of a Pride Day, kind of a, I mean, not super Pride Day, but just sort of that vibe. Mixed with Valentine's Day, mixed with sort of an Easter rebirth. I cannot think of the sort of witchcraft holiday that's around. So the counterpart to basically Samhain. Not Ingvar, that's Summer One or Imbold. I can't remember it off the top of my head. There is one, and so it's kind of all these different sort of folk traditions kind of rolled into one, which is very, very common. We see that across cultures that there are certain time periods in which there are very consistent holidays that we have. Same thing that's happening here. So that's it. Point of order up top is the rolls that we need to get out. We did our ration rolls. We did our, so every time a day goes by and they use their rations, they roll on their ration die. It's a very resource die mechanic, which means that if they roll a 1, it goes down. If they roll a 1 on a 1d4, that means they only have 1 day or 1 instance of whatever that resource is left. In this case, rations. So if you rolled a 1 on a 1d4, that would mean that you would have a day of rations left. It just helps to augment, so that way we're using resources in the game, which I think is really important for running things like D&D, so is the resource management part, without making it sort of tick boxes for things like arrows and rations and counting it that way. Just making it a little bit more abstract, a little bit more fun, and a little less bookkeepy. And usually rolling dice is fun. And this is one of the few instances in which rolling low, depending on what you're doing, can be good, such as injuries. And these lingering injuries work the same way. So Severin has this really nasty acid burned arm that he's really, really struggled to heal. And Zarnok has they're slowed, so I know it's they like rolled their ankle really bad, so they're still slowed and that kind of stuff. Just to kind of give them some lingering injuries, this is one of the things I'm doing is a homebrew like house rule that we're doing, which is that if you get KO'd and knocked to 0 hit points, there's some sort of lingering injury you're likely to pick up from that. Not always, but pretty commonly. So the idea of trying to be like, we want to front load the healing and avoid the sort of particularly D&D 5e 2024 issue, which is where the healers don't heal anybody until they drop to 0. Trying to avoid that, so in doing the sort of pop up, pop down I pop up with 1 hit point, have my turn in this round, and then immediately get knocked back out, trying to avoid a little bit of that pop up, pop down. So that's the point of order, the stuff we want to do up top. After that is some foreshadowing. So these are things that are happening for the PCs in the background. They're taking a look at, try to get one for everybody. Not always. Sometimes I really want to focus in on only 1 or 2. But this one, they just got back into town, so I wanted to have something for everybody. They don't all get put into the session. These are very similar to the secrets and clues kind of section of something like Slight Flourishes, lazy GM tips. Very, very similar to that, except that each of these is sort of tied to, it's also used for foreshadowing for things that are happening in the characters, sometimes with their backstory and stuff that's going on. So we knew that there were going to be the half-elves that was swaying, that they were going to have, I thought, swaying, so it's very loosey-goosey. So this did come up at the very end of the session. I thought Swain was just going to run into them, but it actually ended up that because of the actions a different player character took, that learned that they're basically going to be sentenced in the morning at the court, and so they can be there for that at the start of this new session. Just kind of give them something to look forward to at the end of the session. And Rachma didn't have a chance to talk to Zarnok, but we did talk to Zarnok player a little bit about, like, hey, if you're interested in doing more fights, there's an opportunity to do that. He was asking about if there's a spot he could train, sort of like with his weapons, being a fighter. I was like, oh, don't remember, there's a fighting pit, and there's definitely plenty of room there, and you could maybe even get into some more bouts. So I did that, but hasn't talked to Rachma yet. But that will probably have to begin in the next session as well. Cass and Severin, they did this. A different character also came across the broadsheet. A different player character did. That Charles Rogel, which is one of the Bloody Heather mercenary NPCs, that's sort of a private police force that's being hired by the town right now, is offering a 15-gold bounty on Severin for collusion, breaking, entering, and destruction of property. And so people have come across that. And Cass is an NPC that's not with the party, technically, in these last sessions, has been hanging out in town, but is affiliated with the party, let's put it that way, due to some background stuff with Severin. And Caleb, so Zarnok overheard 2 of the attendants at dinner at the Temple of the Leviathan, where they were eating, discuss about having this sort of quiet discussion about Caleb, who is our cleric, and talking about, hey, they noticed, like, when he was sleeping, that he was still as a corpse. So noticed that he was not breathing. Just little tidbits, throwing little tidbits out there for people to explore and pick up and think about. That's it. And then the rest of this was like, I knew there was going to be 3 days downtime, have some DCs just for those times. We're doing the AM PM slots, so that's 6 total slots. So 3 days of morning, 3 days of evening and afternoon. I haven't gone into the corrals and stuff yet. I wanted to make sure they got plenty of stuff done in this first day. And then on day 2, there's going to be tax day, which is very funny because they asked about if they were going to have to pay taxes and stuff. I forgot about what we were talking about. I think because one of them was trying to get a job, and so they needed to basically do a short job interview. Just they're signing up to basically be a court stenographer or scrivener, and doing that is like, all right, well, you got to prove that you could actually, first of all, write, and that it's going to be legible for people to be able to read as records. And so did that, and they're like, oh, we're going to have to pay taxes too. And it was like, yeah, probably. Not knowing that tax day is actually going to be this day that's coming up, and they're just basically setting up toll booths around the city. Basically, people are going to be paying what is essentially a copper to walk through one of these booths, going back and forth. But in the total of the day, it's going to end up to being about 1 silver per person per AM and PM, so 2 silvers in a day. So it's nothing for the player characters. That's nothing, but it does tell you like how the town taxes people and gets people in, because you also have to pay to get into the town itself. And so they kind of lead up for paying for the big festival that's happening and all that stuff. And so just like with these foreshadowing backgrounds for each of the player characters, I also wanted to make sure that there was discoverable tidbits about the festival that's coming up. So I did that. So here's some things they can learn about. And they know that it's about the vernal equinox, and it has a focus on fertility and lovers, especially. And notice that this is not always the case. This is sort of a very specifically regional function that's happening, and where they really, really lean in on the Naiad stuff. And sort of it's a very sexy holiday, let's put it that way. A very sexy holiday. And so they're kind of leaning in on this. So this is all stuff that, like, as they're going around doing these downtime activities, so they're going to the market and they're talking to people in the market. They're going to visit the smithy. They're talking to people at the harbor master's office about firearms and working on that. That they can kind of start to pick together some of the stuff. They talk to people who are at the temple giving offerings, and that the streets are right now are just kind of choked with people. Like, this town is very much over capacity in the lead up to the big festival on the island. People have sort of congregated in this week before. So this first part, this vernal equinox, and the focus on fertility and spring and rebirth, the cleric just knows that stuff, obviously, and most of the player characters, as people who live in the world, also know the basic ideas of what the festival's about. Because as a religious festival, it's like an Easter, and it's just pervasive across everywhere. But each place can be a little bit different as to how they celebrate it. So we knew that they were going to be sheer clothing, which is one of the things they came across. And that a lot of people are buying very sheer clothing, very sexy, almost like negligee kind of stuff for the lead up here. Lots of talked about all the hot people who were all the very attractive people who were at the temple giving offerings. This is specifically for the Hierophant, which threw them a little bit for the loop. They were trying to figure out, oh, it's a Naiad holiday, so why is there stuff for the Hierophant? Well, the Hierophant's a different god, but the Hierophant god is in charge, or part of their domain is competition, and there's a big competition aspect for it, because it leads up to this, the Naiad's Court element, which is this sort of round-robin competition that takes place as a big fixture of the festival, which is to outline the island's most eligible bachelors and bachelorettes. So this is how we're rolling in all the contests they're going to have in the festival. So there's going to be stuff that's tied to all the different ability scores. So there's going to be stuff that's going to be strength, and then it's like, okay, so whoever comes out on top and is very successful in a bunch of these different types of contests are going to be like, oh, those are the most eligible people. Like, those are the most well-rounded and not just well-rounded, but also lucky and or competent people. The sort of people that are like, oh, they've got it going on, essentially. And so there's a chance that everybody in the party could end up on the podium as part of what they call the Naiad's Court, which is the most eligible bachelors and bachelorettes. So there's basically what are they down here? Because I put them down as NPCs. The ceremony. There's a crown, there's a ring, a chain, and a shield as the sort of different, instead of being like king and queen, because we don't know the gender and sexuality of whoever's going to end up there. So I tried to keep it not as gender term, so I moved away from sort of like the prince, princess, king, queen aspect of sort of like a homecoming prom kind of thing, and moved inside to be a little bit more generic titles. The Bloody Heather, which is the mercenary group that's kind of the hired police force right now, will march out. They haven't done that yet. They haven't learned about the festival that kicks off with sort of like a 5K run. This does a couple of things. It gives them a very easy way to get into the competition of the festival very early on, like immediately as soon as the festival starts. It also is a way to sort of get the players away from their gear, because they're going to have disadvantage with their gear if they want to run with any of that. And Severin heard about the fox hunt, so he didn't know the Naiad's Court part of it. That he wasn't familiar with, but he was familiar with what's considered the sexy fox hunt, the sexy fox hunt. This is a lot of depictions of a similar style of game in media. You can find where it's usually played later in the evening into the night, usually in a forest, in which there are a number of hounds and a number of sort of foxes, and they are chasing after each other. So the Naiad's Court will be the hounds in this, and they are running off to chase people very sexily through the woods at night in their sheer clothing, trying to find their prey, and that makes it seem very predatory. It's supposed to be in good spirit. It is also a way for people to just like go into the woods and bang if they want to do that. Uh, and people looking for lovers. There's also going to be all the standard sort of contests and games and food and drink and gambling and performances. And there's a big market and there's a place where contracts are made. And then there's going to be a big bonfire as well. It's kind of a 2-day festival. The first day is kind of a big day, and then the second day is sort of like if you go to a convention or something like that. That's like the Sunday of the convention where most people are sort of packing stuff up. There's a good place to find like deals and be able to have longer conversations with people because the people aren't as busy. So there's an opportunity for them to meet some NPCs that maybe they're not local, or NPCs that have some on the island that they just haven't had a chance to meet yet, which there are quite a few. Quite a few. I mean, they haven't explored most of the island. They've only explored a little bit of the island. And then I just had a little bit of extra time, so I started throwing together what the stuff would be like. So there's a couple different challenges. So I had challenges as far as how many stones I need to break. Oh, I didn't even say that. There's also that announcement will happen tomorrow. She's from the Bloody. She's the proprietor of the Bloody Seven, which is a private gambling hall, and she's announcing the stones donation. The stones are basically like the winning tokens that you get. They're gonna be these red stones carved with like a clamshell on them for the naiad, and that's what you win in these contests. So there are these stone challenges that happen at the festival. So these are our favored contestants that will be on the podium if our people don't make it to the podium. If they roll really poorly, these are also NPCs that they can have some interactions with and kind of bump heads with as rivals during the festival. And it tells you the player characters need to win at least 7 to get into the tiebreaker round. And if they get 8 or more, they guarantee themselves a spot at the Naiad's court. It kind of tells you there's a leaderboard throughout it. And this is just the order that I'm going to present them to them. And not everybody has to participate in everything. But the more you do participate in, the more likely it is that you're going to get stuff. That you're going to get stones. So the foot race is one that kicks everything off. It's a 5K run from the town to the fairgrounds. There's a kissing contest. There's this laurel jousting, which is sort of like a piggyback thing that one person runs around with the second person on their back with a little lance that they sort of like grab a laurel off a elevated string that holds it. There is a rostrum contest, which is you can do comedy, poetry, storytelling. It's basically a very broad charisma challenge. It's just like, hey, entertain a crowd essentially. Be an entertaining person. And so you can tell jokes, you can tell piece of poetry, you can do storytelling. You could probably also do a musical performance if you wanted to. I would allow that. You can also be a float bearer. So there are sort of the big. So if you've ever seen like a Shinto style festival where they have like big floats and there are people who carry them around, and it's sort of like an honorable thing to be like, oh, I'm a litter bearer for contest. So you can be a float bearer, and there's not really a contest associated with that. That's a freebie that anybody can get as long as they do it. They just have to spend time doing it. There's a cooking contest, which is really probably only important for one of our player characters who does cooking. There is dancing. I put it down that there is both horse-style dancing, horse-style talent, like shooting a horse in basketball, or it's just like, can you match the other person's moves and build on a very sort of classic dance battle kind of thing. Or there is also an endurance test. If you've ever seen the dancing contest where it's like, how long can you dance? We'll probably truncate that a little because a lot of those contests go on for a very long time. So we're going to have to truncate that a little bit. There is maybe we'll put it like in a mud pit or something, and we'll do something silly with it. Or they have to dance in the water. Oof, that'd be very tiring very quickly. There is a shell hunt where they're looking for seashells. and whoever brings back the prettiest, most aesthetic seashell will win. Or I haven't decided if it's going to be that or if it's going to be sort of a scavenger hunt where they're like, oh, they're the hidden around the fairground. I might do that instead. We'll see. There's a seafood boil eating contest. There's a shell game, which is a classic like 3-card Monte kind of thing. There is an oyster speed chucking game. There's a quiz game, that's a very classic intelligence one. And then at the end there is one full on just quarter staves contest, which is just for sure be for our fighter mostly. Do that one. So yeah, make sure that there are at least basically 2 of each for each ability score, so anybody should have a pretty good opportunity to win at least 2 right off the bat, as well as the opportunity to win a lot more. And then there's also stuff that's like a side, so you can see musical performances, players, acrobats, food and drink stalls, gambling. There's fair market that I'm going to have for the gambling. There's going to be crab races, which I thought would be fun. There's going to be a fair market where the uncommon magic items are going to be available. I'm not sure. They're going to have to pool their money together probably if they want an uncommon item. They're pretty pricey. But that's something that they can decide to do or not. There's going to be the fair basilica and court. That was the thing that I talked about where you can get contracts signed and stuff like that. And there's going to be plenty of like not stone related fair games, all your standard stuff. You go to like a county or state fair or anything of that, all that sort of stuff. Like the ring toss and etc. And then there's going to be the evening bonfire. We got our favorite contestants. These aren't particularly interesting. There's a halfer, which I think I might decide if they really focus in on a mirror, that the mirror will be related to the Lightkeeper, which I thought would be fun. You also have Carline, who is a half-elf, who is obviously not from here, not a local. Interesting. And then the ceremony. So if you win the whole shebang, you get a pair of boots of Elvenkind. If you come in second place, you're going to get a masterwork tools of your choice, which is essentially I'm going to make that they're mundane tools, but you essentially always have. No, I changed that. I was going to say that it gives you guidance, but now I'm going to say, if I changed that, I was like, no, I didn't want it to be just a 1d4 because you might only roll a 1 on it. So instead of masterwork tools of your choice, if you are proficient in the tool, when you use the tools, you are counting as if you have expertise in the tools. You basically get to double your proficiency with it. If you wear the chain, you get a half year's free room, board, and drinks at Pole and Pint, which is the island's primary lodging inn for Palais, the town. So this is a pretty good. So they all got kind of a different raising price, cost, worth. Let's put that cash value. Let's say that different cash value. And then if you're at the bottom rung and you get on your podium, you're able to get the podium. You do get just a 50G purse, which for the adventurers is okay, but for the common person would be like a ton of money. That would be like for the common person that would be something like, winning $10,000 to $20,000. Like it's really nice for a common person. Like that's a lot of money for an average person. And then there's going to be the bonfire and then the fox hunt after that once we have the ceremony. So there'll be a bonfire, there'll be drinking and dancing during that part, and all sorts of canoodling, and then that will move into the fox hunt where they'll go off and do the chase through the woods. And who knows what will happen during that. But that's sort of our breakdown. So yeah, it was fun. I think it worked well. One of the things I did is things were a little bit slow. I should have helped speed things up a little bit more, not let them get quite so comfortable. But you live and learn. But it did bring me up one of the things that did happen during this session that made me bring up wanting to talk about habits and stuff like that. Was that we had one instance in which crosstalk was really, really bad, and where I'm trying to talk to the person who's on the opposite end of sort of our gameplay area, and the 3 people in the middle are talking at each other, in between us two trying to. And I didn't cut that out. I should have made them. They were talking in character about stuff. So I wanted them to have that space, but at the same time, I should have cut them off because they were keeping us, the two of us, from having the conversation, which was very important. So, let's just like try to do a little bit better each time, and hopefully, day by day, time by time, you get a little bit better at it. But that is that. That's everything for that. I just thought it'd be fun to show that because I don't usually show the prep notes. Talk about the prep notes. I usually talk about the recap. So I thought it'd be that's fun to take a look at that, especially since it's prepping for a session that's not really guided around doing anything that's other than social RP. They did have a short fight. It was not of note. It was quite silly. They fought a few zombies that came out of the water. Uh, and they sounded like they wanted to investigate that more. So if they decide to investigate that more, we'll have something for that. And I've already got an idea for that. I wrote it down in my recap notes. But for now, let's talk about our best and worst D&D player and dungeon master habits. So, like I said, I sort of grabbed from the ether a list of like what people were kind of putting down as like the most common ones. I figured we'd start with that. So let's do a players one. Players habits, and then we'll come down here and we'll make a DM habits one. And what do we want to do first? Let's do the player habits first. I feel like I focus a bunch on doing DM stuff, so for obvious reasons. But let's switch it up a little bit and let's do player habits first. Like I said, I got a list. We're going to talk about it, and then we're going to talk. Why does it keep doing this? I have a different document. This must be one of the things that happened in the Windows update. So they updated in Windows 11. They updated the Notepad, which is a utility that I use a lot. And now they're making it a little bit more like a full word processor, which I don't like. One of the things I did like about it is just being a plain text editor, because then I don't want to spend too much time focusing on the setup for how things look in WordPad. I just want to get the information there in the most basic form. But that's a me thing. But it's doing this thing where every time that you flip between tabs, it's reverting all the way to the bottom of the document. And I'm trying to look at the top of the document. Help me out here. All right, so number one, what do we got here? Yeah. Show up on time. Yeah, I've definitely played with people who do not show up on time, and it's very frustrating. In the current group that I'm running for right now, we do have one person who is quite often pretty late. But that's not really like their fault. They have, I'm pretty sure, the longest drive out of everybody, and they are not driving in a way. They're driving through high traffic at a high traffic time. Let's put it that way. So they run into a lot of traffic. Yeah, and they have a longer commute. I think a longer commute than anybody for the game. So it makes total sense that they're late, and I don't hold that against them. There's nothing you can do about traffic, and it's just the time that we play, and that's the time that we play. But yeah, showing up on time is really, really distracting. I have played with other people, other than my current people that I'm playing with. I have played with people who just don't show up on time. It is a bit of a sort of like disrespect thing when you have everybody who's ready to play and you have the one player who's always kind of comes in late and they're like, oh, right, there's D&D. And this is what I often come to sometimes. And you may have played with somebody like this before. If you ever play with, you have a player, and I guess you could have a dungeon master like this, though. I think that would be very weird to have a dungeon master like that comes from this idea. If you've ever played with a person where D&D is sort of their backup plan, and I've played with multiple people who are like this over the years, who usually they tend to fall into like that social archetype style of player. Like they're more here just to hang out with their friends. Playing D&D is not particularly important to them. They would be probably just as happy playing a board game or going out to the bar or whatever it is. They just want to show up and hang out with their friends and have a good time. But sometimes that means that if there's an opportunity to go do something, they will drop D&D at the drop of the hat. They'll be like, "Yeah, I'm not going to do the session," And it'll be last minute. I've had people cancel coming to a session like 30 minutes before, be like, "Oh, actually, I have to go. I'm going to do this other thing," and everybody's like, "Yeah, we're in the process of like getting stuff ready to play, and you're telling us you're not coming." Okay. This is it's really a nasty player habit. If you have a player who D&D is sort of like their social backup plan. And the nice thing you can do is what you have to do as a dungeon master is recognize that really early as early as you can and realize that you can't hang any sort of important plot or adventure stuff on that character because you never know if they're going to show up or not. And when they are going to show up, they're probably not going to pay too much attention because that's not the reason that they're here. They're not actually here to play D&D. They're here to hang out with people, which is perfectly reasonable. And if you play a game that's a very beer and pretzel style game where you don't have a whole bunch of like plot or really deep RP or stuff like that that you're trying to do, uh, it's perfectly fine. Or you run something that's maybe a little bit more like a West Marches kind of thing where people drop in and out all the time, and you have sort of a larger pool of regular players, and so if somebody doesn't show up, it's not that big of a deal. Uh, but yeah, showing up on time is, oh man, that one's really rough because then you're making you have to remember if you let's say you're playing in a standard D&D group, that means 4 players, 1 DM. That means that for every let's say 30 minutes that you're late, you are causing 4 other people to wait 30 minutes. So that's 2 hours of waiting essentially for your 30 minutes of lateness. So please, if you are a player, be respectful of the people that you play with, and if you know the start time, do your damnedest to show up on the start time. And if D&D is not your thing, just make it pretty clear up front that like, hey, you're more interested in doing other things, but you'll play D&D. And I feel like a good dungeon master or an experienced dungeon master will work around them and be like, oh, okay, you are not going to be like a pillar for this game. Like I can't use your player characters an important cog in the grand narrative I'm trying to tell. Like they just have to be a person who shows up. They have to be a side character in their own campaign. And once you recognize that, you can change that, and then usually everybody's happy. Just so if you are that type of player, just be very, very open in your communication about uh, the way you're coming to the table, sort of your expectations for the game, and for engaging with the hobby in the group. Because you don't want your in real life friends to be mad at you because you're not taking their fake friends, their made up imaginary friends seriously. It's a very funny way to put it. Number 2, pay attention. Yeah. I don't feel like I have too much of a problem with this most of the time. Sometimes. I think in the beginning of the campaign we had more issues with this when I was first running my Friday campaign. We had a little bit more, everybody was a little bit more scattered. People were starting to sort of lock in a little bit more, which is good. And pay attention. But it is with the crosstalk, and I did hear one of my players talking about this yesterday. It's like, oh, sometimes I actively don't listen to another character having like time with the DM because I don't want to do like the metagaming thing. And like that's perfectly fine. I understand that the kernel of that, and I try to do that too. I kind of when I'm a player, I try to float in and out a little bit. So I don't want to give it too much attention, but I do want to make sure that I get sort of the gist of what's going on. Because what you don't want to do is if you're not paying attention to in a scene that doesn't include your player character, and say that my friend learns about some very specific things about what's going on. They uncover a big clue about the grander narrative or whatever it is, or they're like, oh, I investigate this magic item, and then find out what the magic item does, and how often does this come up at a table you're at, where the player turns to the rest of the group and goes like, I tell you guys that. Well, if you're not paying attention, you didn't hear the 5 minutes of explanation the Dungeon Master gave. So when the players, you're basically forcing the player to repeat something that was just said. So you kind of have to. It's weird, like it's a balancing act. Other than that, like obviously pay attention in combat. This is something I came was listening to. I've been slowly listening my way through NADPOD. That's not another D&D podcast. Uh, and one of the things that they had in their mixed bag, which I felt very sort of like in my core, um, where they were talking about they had a read on something in their one of their dungeon court episodes, which is like you should want to pay attention to your friends and watch them do cool stuff. Like if you're not invested in the storylines and success of your friends at the table, they're not going to be. You can't expect for them to have that same investment in your character. And I do feel that sometimes you run for particular players or particular groups, especially if it's a new group that's just hasn't really kind of come together yet. You'll get things where it's just like sometimes it feels like you're dungeon mastering for different solo games sometimes. And you're like, you guys need to come together, pay attention to each other, get invested in each other's stories, have your player characters, have you as players lean into each other, and your player characters also find a way for your player characters to lean into each other and to become the group. There is it's a fine balance, and I think it's a really really tough skill to learn as a player to be like. We come across players who say, "Oh, that's not what my character would do," and really good players in that I've seen and I've played with will find a way to be like, "How do I make my character care about this? How do I turn my character's obvious no into a yes? How do I get them invested in this?" And that is some lifting that you have to do as a good player, as you do that. Is paying attention, making sure that you know what's going on. When it's not your turn in combat, don't just fully zone out and start looking at stuff on your phone. Those sorts of things. Like give presence to everybody else at the table. It's just not the you show, and then the other 80% of the time is just waiting for it to be the you show again. So please pay attention, get invested in everything that's going on. It saves time for not having to re-explain things. Take notes, be engaged, watch your friends do cool stuff, be happy for them, be sad for them, be there for them, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, pay attention, stay engaged. I know it's difficult. I know combat can be slow sometimes. Just do something. Sometimes I do that and I listen to people who I'm playing with and I'll be like, try to give them soft advice. Not tell them what to do on the turn, but sometimes I'll be like, hey, you could also do this if that's something that you're interested in. Especially that happens a lot, I think, from my side, just because I'm pretty sure I know the rules a little bit better of D&D 5e 2024 than probably anybody else still, and just D&D in general. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that I try to do is try to figure out how can I be helpful in that situation or maybe prompt them for things. Which very much kind of goes up into the next one. Know your character. Yeah, there's really not anything quite as bad as a player who doesn't know their character. I think I've told this little anecdote before, but I did play with somebody for many many years who always played rogues, which is that should be probably a warning bell right there. They only play one class in many many years and many different adventures and campaigns that they always play rogue. But then at the process of playing with them for many many years, still not know how the rogue works. And I'm like, you've been playing them so many sessions. How do you still not know how sneak attack works? Like you have to learn it. Like just pick the book up and read it. Write a note for yourself. Learn how sneak attack works. It's been years. So yeah, know your character. Some systems are easier than others, so obviously you're playing something a little bit more crunchy, like a Pathfinder style game. There's a little bit more things going on that you have to take into account. But most of the characters, especially in D&D 5e 2024, are pretty simple to run, so there's really not a huge excuse for doing that. Now, I don't want to flame one of my players who was in our session yesterday who was asking questions, like clarifying questions about trying to understand how it works. That's fine. Like, please ask questions about and read up on how the things are supposed to, how your abilities and class features are supposed to work. And But don't get to a place where you're slowing down the game at the table because you don't know what your character can do. That said, we also had a player who forgot that they could do, as a rogue, do sneak attack at first level, and so didn't do sneak attack for 15 sessions of the game. Or I think technically 14. They figured it out before the last session. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you probably should have been doing that. And, as a dungeon master, I try not to fully overstep, and uh, I don't want to run your characters. And I'm not going to learn your characters. I don't ask for my character sheets. I don't care. You guys are using the official rules. You build them the way that you're building them. If you're following the correct rules for character creation and leveling up and all that stuff, then I have no need to look at your character sheets. I have to trust you as a dungeon master that you can take care of your own character. Because if I can't trust my players that they can run their own characters, then I'm spending all my time running their characters. If I'm running your characters and I'm running the world, then I'm pretty much just playing by myself. And I can just go do it. We've seen it on the channel, right? I'm perfectly happy doing solo play. It's a very different style of D&D, but I do enjoy it in some way. So yeah, you got to know your character. You don't want to slow things down. This happens with spells too. If you play somebody who's a caster and you're not familiar with casting, uh, you got to learn them. Buy some spell cards, make some spell cards, do that stuff. Do whatever you need to do. Make your own notes. I know lots of people, especially playing Pathfinder, but even in the other campaign that I'm running, or not running, that I'm playing in, I two of I think at least one. I think two of the two other players have like flow charts for their actions about like in this situation, here's usually what I do. Here's sort of the combination of action bonus action that I try to do, and for reaction and my reactions, and even that I have a quick list too. I have a combat quick list in that campaign. I'm like, okay, because we're playing with a revised martial equipment, which has a whole bunch of extra bells and whistles for martial classes. So you've got a bunch of extra stuff that like your weapons do, and a bunch of different abilities that kind of come with your masteries. And so my character has like, okay, I have this bonus action, this free action, this no action, this reaction that I can do also when I get the power attack, and also when I do a powerful blow. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff, so that I have a whole document that's got a little note section on it, just to keep things quick at the table, as quick as we can go. Keep moving through things, so you're not really tying things down. And that's really what knowing your character is about. Is about speeding up play at the table, because it really sucks when you don't realize you have a player that you're kind of hoping that they're going to use a specific ability that they have because you're trying to tie something to it. They forget about it, or they don't know that they have it, or they're like, "I'm going to cast a spell," and then everybody sits there for 3 minutes while you go through 3 to 5 minutes while you go through all your spells trying to figure out which of the one spell you're going to cast. Slows down the game. It's more of a speed thing, which is very important, especially in D&D combat, to keep the speed up. Listen to the DM. I mean that's we're just gonna put this here. Listen to the DM. DM. Listen to the DM. Yeah. This is one of those things I probably I'd say I don't know if I'd say it's a weak spot. I think it's definitely one of my less tuned things. Is that sometimes, like we just saw in the prep document, I can be really I can pack a lot of dense information into stuff, or it can be a little bit of a sensory overload as to like, oh, there's all these different NPCs. Here's all this different stuff that's going on. Here's all these different clues about you get picked up. There can be a lot of feels like a different eclectic mix of there's always something to learn about either the world or about the plot or about the characters. That's very consistent. It can be a little bit like drinking from a fire hose. So I understand that it is one of my weak parts is that when things I say are so dense as to what I'm talking about, that it's not hard for them. I feel like my players should listen to me, but sometimes it's hard for them to pick out what is the more important things and things that I'm saying. So it is something that I struggle with, but that you should pay attention in general, and you should definitely listen to the DM. This kind of goes back to the bad dark mantle fight that they had, that my group had in the dungeon, where they nearly wiped, nearly got the total party kill, if not for their NPC savior, which is not like a big powerful DM NPC, but literally just a commoner who was also there, who was able to help in the waning moments. But if I have a room description and I'm telling you about the ceiling, that means the ceiling is probably important. Not always. Like sometimes it's just be like it may be more of an architectural thing, or I'm hinting at something else that's happening in the dungeon. But in this instance, it's like, hey, there's a coffer barrel ceiling, being like, oh, if it's coffer, there's little hidey blind spots that, even though you guys have light in the room, that you can't see the monsters that are hidden up in there. But do give them the idea that, like, oh yeah, things attack from the ceiling in D&D, which is not something they had really come across yet. So now they have, and now we do have at least one, at least one player who's like, I checked the ceiling. Good, yeah, you should check the ceiling in the room you're going to. But yeah, this is one of the things you list to the DM, because there's oftentimes there's going to be world building stuff. There's going to be lore. There's going to be clues that they're going to little tidbits they're going to throw out your way. Like I have those big secrets and clues in the prep document. But here's just stuff that you learn about each other, about the world, about maybe the plot that's going on. So yeah, listen to the end. It says, respect their rulings and narrative. They're your guide, not your opponent. Okay. Listen to the DMs a little. Respect their rulings and narrative. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I'd say that's listen to the DM. I think that's just being a good player in general. I think there's probably going to be another one that's going to be very similar to that on this list. Share the spotlight. Yeah. Presumably you're playing with other people. People who may or may not actually be your friends. And one of the things we should do is make sure that we share that spotlight as a player. Do not try to be the main character in your own D&D game. Nobody likes that. It's got real sort of pick-me energy. It's not great. People do not want to play with you if you try to make everything about your character. In this one, they say encourage quieter players to contribute and get their moments too, which is not quite what I would say share the spotlight's about. Share the spotlight's about, like, basically not being a pick-me. And one of the things that I did bring up in our last session is like, hey, make sure I don't want everybody to split up and do individual things. So if you're going to a place and you guys feel like there's a player character that's going to a specific place in town, if there's things that you think that you could accomplish there, like maybe you're looking for information, maybe you want to talk to somebody about something, maybe you want to buy or sell something, any of those things, you can tag along with them. So that way, instead of trying to run individually 4 different scenes, we can maybe run only 2 scenes, if you guys split up into duos, or if it's a trio and a solo, however it is. Try to split those things up. And it makes the game run faster, and it gives you an opportunity to like get somebody else to help you. You can get help on actions, you can get guidance, you can have when you go off by yourself as a player character, you have to rely completely on your own proficiencies and stats. And as somebody who's played a character just recently who was not charisma based at all and had to get interrogated, found himself getting interrogated by guards and not doing a good job. The first thing he did was try to find a way to lead these guards back to the person on his team who does have good charisma to help sort of pull his butt out of the fire. So do that. It was like, yeah, I could have taken him with me, but that wasn't. I was really just there for shopping. I wasn't planning on trying to get into this interaction. So a little bit different. But yeah, try to. And this works both ways. Either try to bring somebody with you when you go do something as a player. Look for those ways. We talked about like trying to be a proactive player. Look for those ways to sort of bring somebody with you, or try to tag along with somebody else. And hopefully they will allow you. Sometimes they don't, depending on what they're doing. And it may be specific to your character. And that's the way. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe you smell and they just don't want you around. I don't know your group, and I don't know you. Alright, so listen to your DM. Yeah, very much respect other players. That one's so broad, it's not even really worth talking about. Because that's not really a habit, it's just being courteous. Like, be courteous. Which, being courteous could be all these things, right? It could be being courteous is showing up on time. It's paying attention. It's listening to the DM. It's knowing your character and sharing the spotlight. So we're just gonna. That's not it. One's not even gonna be worth talking about. Yeah, be rules literate. I put this up here. Actually, I'm just gonna say know the rules. Know the rules. Know the rules. And that falls in with it. With know your character as well. So yeah, know the rules, the basics of the game. You don't have to know every single thing. You don't have to have the jump stuff memorized about like how many feet you can go with a standing long jump versus a running long jump, etc. You don't need to have that stuff, but like make sure you know how to attack. Make sure you know advantage and disadvantage. Might be helpful if you know the cover rules, which is just a +2 or +5, and have maybe a cheat sheet for the conditions. If you have a specific condition you either give, like if you are playing a character that poisons a bunch of people, you should know the poison condition rules. Or so I think, yeah, knowing the rules is important, and also knowing your character. So having an idea of like what the falling damage is, which is just 1d6 per 10 feet, it helps to know some of those basic things. Know the action economy, etc. So yeah, know the rules. And here it says to be rules literate, not rules lawyery. And that's true, yeah. Know the rules. And this kind of goes up with listen to the DM. Uh, yeah, you gotta. Yeah, so I'm gonna say know the rules, but defer to the DM. Because the DM's always gonna have to make a ruling. We had to make a ruling yesterday because of the weird language for the artificer. It's like uh, on their next, or sorry, it's for one of the spells, and it says on their next, they have disadvantage on their next weapon attack. And I'm like, oh, but if you're fighting zombies and zombies aren't using weapons, would that count? That was sort of the question from the artificer, and I was like, yes, it is going to count. I think that's just weird. That's the weird 2024 language that they've changed some things up. So even though you're not attacking with a weapon, you would assume that because tons of monsters don't use weapons, but then there are natural weapons, but those aren't really well identified on something like a character stat block. But you assume like if they're making, I'm like, I don't know why they didn't just put melee attack. They clearly meant melee attack for this. But that is one of the changes for the 2024 rules and rewrites on some of the spell language that gets a little wonky sometimes. But yeah, and so defer to the DM and just be like, hey, what is this going to be like? Or this is my understanding. Is that your understanding? Is that how you're going to roll it? That's perfectly fine to ask those things beforehand. Or if you don't do that, don't be too upset if they don't agree with you when you try to pull some shenanigans first in character. Open to shenanigans, as any good dungeon master is. I'm open to some amount of shenanigans, like having one of my player characters lasso and hogtie a zombie, which is kind of what happened in this last session. It was like, this is very silly, but sure, yes, you could do that. And yeah, I'm going to give you some mechanical bonus, so you're able to knock it off its feet, and they're sort of bound up, but it is going to try to roll around and still bite at your ankles. They're not going to be very effective, but that's what they're going to try to do. That's right, we had share the spotlight. Ask before you act. Oh, this is such a big one. It's not even ask. It's Oh, this is weird. That's not how I would have interpreted that. This says ask before you act, especially if it might drastically impact others or the story. The examples they list are starting PvP, stealing from the party, Stealing from party members. What the heck are party members? Oh, I think it's supposed to be party members. I'm missing an M there. Stealing from party members. Yeah, which I would include as sort of PvP activity. Uh, yeah, that's not how I would take that. I'm going to say still S. Intention. I'm going to. How do I say this? Intention, ask, roll. Actually, I'm going to make this ask, intention, roll. So this is sort of it's almost like a framework as a player and DM going back and forth. So this happens. This is something that's sort of what I would call an experienced DM or dungeon master or game master tip is you get to a point where you're talking with players and you're running games. You run into this issue where people are trying to do weird things. You get into a lot of miscommunication, and doing this sort of like little framework will help solve a lot of that and get to nip it in the bud and make it take a lot less time and everybody's more on the same page about what's happening. Wait for roll call. So if you're a dungeon master, you've come across this if you're a player. Sometimes as a player, you'll ask the things like, I'm trying to think of a very specific example. Oh, here's one that happened that I can pick up off the top of my head that happened in our last session. I understood what the intention was, so I didn't have to go through this process, but I could very much see, in a way, depending if they come up differently, not understanding what it was. So, had my player ask, they're in a temple and ask, is there a window in this room? And you might go, yes, there's a window, no, there's not a window. And then that's a yes-no binary. As a dungeon master, if you give that advice, then the player's like, okay, well, I had an idea for a window, but if there's not a window in here, then I guess I can't do the idea. So what you really want to do as a dungeon master is try to figure out the intention. So I understood what this player's intention was with the window because they had already telegraphed that, so I understood what it was. But in a situation where I didn't know that, and they asked like, "Oh, is there a window in this room?" I'd be like, "What are you trying to do? What's your intention? Like, what are you trying to accomplish?" In this player's instance, they would be like, "Oh, I'm trying to leave through the window. I want to leave this room through the window instead of having to go back through the main hall, the main area where I think somebody's going to recognize me." Oh, okay, you're looking for a way to basically sneak out of here. Yeah, there's a window for that. You can absolutely have a window for that. And sometimes, and that's not a good situation for this last part. This I could have made him and like, no, there's not a window in here, but there is definitely a back door that will get you out of the temple. And then it'd be like, great, I'll make a stealth check. So don't do that as a player. Don't just immediately start trying to do that kind of thing. What you want to do is ask your question, clear your intention. This helps as you do as a player too. Hey, is there something? Hey, is there a window in this room? I'm trying to sneak out. That's it, and that takes care of point 1 and 2. That's the ask and the intention. And then instead of being like, oh, I'm going to sneak out and I'm going to roll stealth, don't do that last part. You want to wait for the roll call. This is something that happens pretty often. You kind of have to train as dungeon master. You often have to train players how to do that. It's like if you start rolling before I've called for the roll, that roll's not going to count. Be like, one of the things that happens is that if you preemptively roll, if you roll badly, I can't give you information that I would have just given you for free because now you failed a roll. So allow me the opportunity to be like, does this need a roll? And if it is, I will call for the roll. Or otherwise, there's a lot of stuff, and it's a thing that I've done as a player, as I play this little game called How Much Can I Get for Free? Where I'd be like, hey, I'm trying to think of a recent example from a game I've been playing in, but it's been a couple weeks since we played. it'll be like, let's say we come across a dead body, and my ranger gets down on one knee, starts looking at the body, be like, can I tell what this guy died from? Now, if the dungeon master is like, it's important that they understand how this person died, or it's a very obvious way of how they died. I'm just going to tell you the information. You don't have to, no medicine check required because you might fail a medicine check roll, and then I can't give you the information. So you for sure know that this guy looks like he got teared apart by what looks like slash marks, and they look like they're claws, not like weapons. Now, on top of that, maybe there's a medicine check or a nature check to try to determine what kind of creature did this. But we know for certain, oh, there was a beast here, a beast or a monster or something here. He killed it. This was not another humanoid who did this. So this is what I call the how much can I get for free, where I do not I do not say things like, can I make a perception check? I change the language of that as a player and be like, what do I want out of the perception check? And okay, do I see anybody acting suspicious? And that's probably more of an insight check, but that's the thing. Instead of being like, hey, can I make an insight check on this guy? Or some guy's talking to you. Sometimes, uh, yeah, that's a good one. So you're talking with the group's talking with an NPC. You're kind of getting the vibes that maybe this guy, the person they're talking to, is not on the level. It's not giving them the full truth. You might go. A lot of players will go. I'd like to roll an insight check on this, and the first thing I do is you've asked for to roll a check. The second step is I do intention. What are you looking for? What are you trying to determine? That way I know whether that's a roll or not. I'll be like, oh, I want to know, does it seem like this guy's lying to us about the job? Is he leaving something out of the description of the job? Yeah, absolutely, roll for that. Or you get the feeling that there's definitely more to it that they're holding back, no roll required, but you're not sure of it. So we'll just bypass the roll, and if you want to ask clarifying questions or be a little bit more insightful, or you want to use some of your social skills to maybe pressure them with a little intimidation or something like that, you could do that. Because it's important that you recognize and you know that there's more to the job than is being led on. So that's a good way. So the how much can I get for free is stuff like that. Where it's like you'll run into a lot of dungeon masters, and I think a lot of dungeon masters are very happy to just give you information about stuff without any roll. And if you ask for it and then you get to roll, then you usually get extra stuff. So yeah, it's a pro tip as a player. Is just ask questions and don't try to preempt things into a role. Make sure the dungeon master understands the intention of what you're trying to do for, because sometimes they'll be like, "Yes, I like the intention. I like what you're trying to do. This is not the way that to do it, though." And just like with the window example, there's not a window in this room because it doesn't make sense where there's a window in this room. But I know that you're trying to sneak out of the temple, and there's absolutely a back door, a side passage with a back door out of the temple that you can find. So yeah, as before you act, uh, keep meta knowledge separate. Yeah, yeah. Metagaming is like it happens, and it's not always bad. Sometimes it's good. Like I said, some of that stuff, some of the light you could consider paying attention. Like we were talking about with paying attention, it's like you should at least pay some amount of attention to another player character who is talking with the DM, having a side conversation with the DM. Because what you don't want them to do is the player to then turn around and be like, "I explained that all to you," and you're like, "I don't know what that was this, what it is." But you need to make sure that they. And oftentimes, as the player, I will just ask the other player to be like, "Do you tell us that?" And sometimes we'll be like, "No, I don't." And like, all right. And then that's the part where I'm like, all right, strike that from the mind. They did not tell me that. If I've written that down in my notes, scratch that out. I do not know this. And that's why it's helpful to take notes too. It can give you a way to only keep track of the stuff that may be in character that you know. Yeah, the meta knowledge separate. Yeah. It's okay to just ask your dungeon master. Sometimes I do this, especially early on in campaigns, where I'll ask a dungeon master and be like, "How much do we know about?" Like, if you come across, let's say, you're on a little adventure and you come across some frozen statues of people that are surprisingly lifelike. and you look at them, and I think I would ask, as a player, oftentimes I'll ask, like, how much do we know about monsters like basilisks, Medusa, or Gorgons who can do things like turn, or not the D&D Gorgon because that's the big bull, Medusa, uh, even though Medusa is a Gorgon, and not important. Uh, Look at the Dungeon Master and be like, how much do we know about monsters that can turn people to stone? Because we know, as a player, I know that there are multiple creatures in D&D that can do that. But there could also be spells. There's spells that do it. There's a lot of other different things, and that gives you the DM the opportunity to be like, okay, yes, you know this, or and they can also set the tone for the campaign that you're playing in. If they're like, no, you guys, people in the world have functionally zero knowledge about monsters, so you know, okay, I need to actually keep that meta knowledge that I know about D&D monsters kind of in the background that I don't know about that specifically. So yeah, it's a little bit difficult. It takes some practice, I feel like, to get pretty good at this. Uh, new players are often very bad about it, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I, it's not really. It's almost not a habit. It's just like playing the game. But yeah, I guess we'll leave it in there. That's fine. Role play respectfully, stay in character, but avoid offensive stereotypes or disruptive behavior. Um, yeah, I'm gonna put this under. It kind of goes under share the spotlight and pay attention, which is essentially don't be disruptive. Yeah, I think it kind of falls under both. I'm gonna put this under pay attention though. Avoid disruptive behavior. Because I have definitely played with many a person who's like, as soon as it's not their turn doing something, they immediately are like on their phone or their computer looking at other stuff. And then we'll interrupt whatever's going on to tell them to be like, oh, look at this funny Reddit post, or look at this. I was looking at dice online. Look at these cool dice. Be like, that's nice. We're in the middle of a game, so please don't bring this up. Save this for later. We'll take a break at some point, or we'll hit a little in between scenes while I'm looking stuff up, and then feel free to share. But don't disrupt the game to do that. But again, that's not really a role play thing. So that's just a disruptive behavior. I think what they're looking for with disruptive behavior is uh, maybe say bring in the instigation. If you're familiar with sort of the player archetypes, one of them is the instigator, which is sort of a person who will just do stuff. And they're both good and bad. They're like if they get bored, they will just start doing stuff. That they are the sort of personified in-universe aspect of ADHD at the table, where they're like, you know, sometimes it can be really random, where they're like, I'm going to steal stuff from this NPC, and I'm like, why? Why are you doing that? This isn't important. Uh, Instigators are not always doing bad. Instigators can be good when they can be used as a force of good for the campaign. If you have a group that sits around and doesn't like make decisions about stuff, or they really struggle with analysis paralysis and figuring out what to do and stuff like that, having an instigator in the group is great because they'll be like bored. I make a choice and I start doing that. Happens all the time. We come to a T intersection, people start talking about which way to go. The instigator's like bored. I head left. Okay, you guys see that this person is heading off left. What are you doing? Are you following or not? Sometimes they follow, sometimes they don't. Sometimes that person gets in trouble, sometimes they don't. So instigation can be really good because it'll make sure that people are moving, but it also can be super destructive. I have some bad parts about instigating things where I've had it lead to PvP and have a instigator kill a different player character, and that's not fun. And that was definitely a big mistake that I made as a character. I was trying to introduce somebody to the game, and so I wanted them to understand that PvP was on the table, but I should have reined it in and not let them. do what happened. So that was a learning moment for me. That's much to be like, all right, I gotta be really clear about if anybody ever wants to do any sort of like PvP stuff about like stealing money from people or uh, getting into conflict with each other and they want to start rolling. You have to be very specific about how that's being done. Really, really rein it in. Uh, support the group goal. Yeah, that's a big one. Support the group goal. That's really just be a team player, which is under share the spotlight. And that's sort of find the motivation or your PC to agree. Like I said earlier, a lot of it kind of comes down to being a higher quality, a higher level of being a player is finding a way to get your PC when you get into situations where it's like, oh well, my player wouldn't do that, so my player character wouldn't do that. Okay, but what would make your player character agree to that? How do you get them to agree with the group? How do you get them to stay part of the group? Because it's very easy to be contrarian. No member of a group has no members of a group have 100% consistency and are in sync with about what they believe and what they want done. That they're never going to be 100% of that. So it's sort of a shared cause. You have to find your way to do that. Um, I think it just takes practice. I feel like that's something that when I was a newer player, I struggled with a lot, and I think a lot of new players do. But as you get a little bit more experienced in the game and playing with a bunch of different groups, you find a reason like, okay, how do I get my character to agree to this? And sometimes that's an internal thing. Sometimes it's an external thing. It's like sometimes you do a little bargaining. It's like, oh yes, I will do this, but after we do this, I need you guys to help me with whatever thing it is my player character is interested in, and that's the reason I'm going to go on this. Is everybody cool with that? Is as soon as we get this done, I want to go do my thing. And most big groups will be like, oh yeah, absolutely. And that's his way as a player, and your player character can help blend the group and make the group a cohesive unit by being like, we have all agreed to help each other on our individual things. Which is something that I think that my current group struggles with a little bit. They, like I said, they do have a little bit more. They, for a long time, were very much felt like I was running a bunch of different solo games at the same time with a bunch of people sitting in the same room. They're starting to cohese a little bit more and trying to pull each other together and see how they're related. But it is sometimes just like, I want to do this one thing, you clearly want to do this other thing. I agree to go with you to do the other thing, but when we're done with that, you're going to help me with my thing. And that's a very easy way to, it's sort of a quick cheat to get the group cohesiveness up and to share the spotlight and be a team player. Because the other thing that happens is that if it becomes so much of a thing that was like, well, my character wouldn't do that. Okay, then your character's not in this campaign anymore. If you refuse to go on the adventures to go with people, then you need to bring in a player character. That player character walks off into the sunset, and you need to come back with a player character who is going to be helpful for the group. That's it. That's a change. It's fine. Like I don't have to kill your character or anything. They can just walk off stage. That'll be it. It's like you need to come back with a different character who's going to be work with the group. Oh, that comes right up in the next one, which is support the group goal. Yeah, that's all the same thing. Yeah, communicate openly. This is about speaking up about concerns, but doing it in a kindly and constructive manner. Yeah. And where do I want to put this? Pay attention. Know the rules, but prefer show up on time. Pay attention. This kind of thing. I'm gonna just say voice concerns in a respectful way. I think it's very easy for people group to they kind of fall into one or two camps as players. I feel like oftentimes, or they have tendencies to lean one way or the other. Either something comes up in the game that they don't like and they kind of knuckle it under, and over time that starts to build some resentment towards the game towards other players, towards the dungeon master themselves. So you don't want to do that. If you're having issues with the campaign, bring it to your dungeon master's attention. They may not know anything about it, and so you need to bring that to their attention and just do it in a very respectful way. Oftentimes, the easiest way to do that, I do like to follow the sort of public praise, private criticism. It's like if you want to praise somebody, you can do that in front of everybody and like, oh, this person did a really great job about this, and I really want to highlight that. But if you have concerns or some criticisms, try to voice that away from the table. Use a Discord, text, a phone call, hang out after the session if you just want a moment to bend your DM's ear to talk to them about something specific. Do that. I like to, like I said, I like to finish each session with questions, comments, concerns, things you like, things you didn't like about the session, just to try to get a temperature gauge. And so if it's not a very sensitive topic, you can bring it up there with me when I'm dungeon mastering you. If you're one of my players, bring it up then. We can talk about it. As long as we say respectful about it, I think it's fine. So I think you have the people who do that, so you have people who will knuckle under it and become resentful about it, and then other people who will blow up about it very quickly. I think that's the thing that I see too often in like rando online games where you see a bunch of the D&D horror stories and stuff like that. As somebody who's played in an open like pickup game online or a few of them, uh, yeah. Uh, here's it's not really. I don't think it's a hot take, but the thing is that open tables with random people, you usually play with some of the worst dungeon masters and players around. Uh, Even though a lot of those dungeon masters are some of them are doing the honest God's work at trying to run D&D for people, random people online, but they are sort of. It has been my experience, and I think it's a lot of people's experience, that people who can only play with a bunch of other random people online are people who consistently cannot e sometimes find, but oftentimes I think it's less likely that they can't find a game, a local game. It's that they've gotten kicked out of probably most games. People do not want to play with them. The people who know them don't want to play with them. It's not that there's not games, it's that people do not want to play with it. And so when you have a whole bunch of people who other people don't want to play with, and then they all try to play D&D together online, it's usually not a ton of fun. And there is bad pizza is good. It's still good pizza, but bad D&D is not better than no D&D. And so you do run into people who will often blow up very quickly about stuff, or people who, like I said, kind of don't follow this stuff, who don't know the rules or super rules lawyery about only following raw rules as written, that don't pay attention when it's not their turn, who don't show up at time or have to leave early but don't tell people, or dips out in the middle of a session, who don't ever want to share the spotlight, who are always very secretive about the dungeon. They don't do the ask intention thing. They won't tell you why they want to look for this thing. And so you're like, I don't know what you're trying to accomplish, so my answer is probably going to be no. As me as a DM, it's like, if I don't understand what you're asking for, I'm probably going to more likely to tell you no than yes. But other people are different. Other people will say yes to most things. Or you don't voice concerns in a respectful way if you get belligerent just because you don't agree with a ruling, and it totally derails the session. And a lot of these things are real things that I have experienced playing online with random people. You're like, oof, it's and playing in person with people too. For a long time I ran a kind of open game at a gaming store, where we would do adventures, like weekly adventure. We were doing like adventures, like kind of stuff. Where it's like, oh, you show up and we have a couple of people who run. You come sit down with random people, introduce your characters. We go on this little adventures, all pretty much nothing but one shots. And we'll run the one shot and we'll go through it, and you run into some real weirdos and some real bad experiences with that too. sometimes the not great part of people playing D&D. Some of that horror story kind of stuff. Take notes. Yeah, this goes with pay attention. Take notes. It's really helpful. If you have a dungeon master who throws out a lot of stuff at you, and I play in a game that's like that, and I'm pretty sure I think my players would probably agree that I run a game that's like that, where there's just a bunch of stuff to learn about. Almost every new interaction you have is going to tell you something a little bit about the world, going to tell you about something that's going on, going to you're going to find out something about one of your player characters, all that sort of stuff. So take notes. It's helpful. It's also nice as a dungeon master when your players remember your NPC names, even though they're struggling remembering one of the NPC's names that they just spent a bunch of sessions with, named Japheth. And they cannot remember Japheth's name for the life of them, the entire group. I don't know why. I have no problem remembering this NPC's name. I'm more likely to forget some of the other NPCs' names, but for some reason they just cannot ever remember this guy's name. I find it funny. They're trying to remember, they just don't remember. But yeah, I mean, it's helpful. It's always nice as a dungeon master when you see people take notes and then they bring stuff back up from their notes. Like, oh, I remember that, or oh, it's in my notes. What's that guy's name? And if you take the time to do that, it warms my heart as a dungeon master. It shows you that you're paying attention. Don't hog the DM. Let's share the spotlight too. That's very pick me energy. This is when players. I feel like I have one player in my current group that I'm running for that can be a little bad about hogging the spotlight. They're not doing it on purpose. I think they just have a ton of questions about stuff. And about their specific character and their interaction with other stuff in the world. And so I think that there is a little bit of that kind of goes on. But I don't think it's intentional, so I try to be very easy on them. But I do often have to tell them, be like, we'll have to come back to that. We're going to switch, we're going to move the lens over to somebody else. We're going to focus in on somebody else right now. Yeah, but it's basically making sure that everybody gets time with the DM. So you don't want to hog them. Help new players. Yeah, that's a good one. Show up on time, pay attention to the rules. Yeah, I think that kind of goes with know the rules. Help new players. One thing that's super useful, if you're trying to introduce somebody new to the game, you should set them next to whoever the most experienced player is at the table as Dungeon Master. It is fully within your purview, I guess, as a Dungeon Master. It doesn't really come up often, but you can do assigned seating for your games if you want. And it's helpful to be like, when everybody's sitting down for a session, be like, oh, you have a new person, be like, why don't you take a seat next to this person who I know is a veteran player, and they'll be able to help you if you have any questions. So that way, me as DM can focus on doing the full DM stuff, and I'll also answer your questions. But the player next to you, the veteran player next to you, is going to have a lot more downtime where they're going to be available to answer questions and be able to show you stuff and see your character sheet and be able to point out stuff on it and explain things to you. So yeah, help new players. What you don't want to do is we're just gonna put it in here. Yep. Yeah, we'll put it. Don't play their characters. Don't play their PC. That's where the thing goes. There's this cool piece. It's kind of writing advice where it talks like, if you have somebody who has a strength with your character, the easiest way to do a weakness for that character is you can either go one of two routes. You can either go the opposite of their strength, or you can pervert their strength into what becomes then their weakness. This is what I think about. Like, my classic example is like Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. Like, that is the guy who is strong and powerful. He's charismatic, and he is clearly very popular in town. But also, he's all the worst parts of those. He's the worst of what he is because of his strength, not in spite of it. It's like, oh yeah, of course he's super popular, so he's a total egomaniacal dick to everybody. Like, he's not cool. It's like, yeah, he's strong, and that makes him super belligerent, so he's a big bully. So you lean into the things that make them strong, and that becomes their weakness. And that's what I think about, like, knowing the rules or being a veteran player. Is like, because you're a veteran player and you see somebody who's maybe struggling to play the game, it can have this tendency to lead into like, oh, I'll just do it for you. But it's like, no, you want them to play it. Don't play the player character for them. Don't tell them what to do. Give them options, not too many options. Just be like, hey, here's a thing you could do that's usually pretty good in this situation. Is there anything else that you're thinking about, or something else that you want to accomplish? Because one of the things that's really cool with a new player that's into the hobby is they're not sort of super familiar with the rules and what is and is not possible with that, which means they're a little bit more creative, often things that they want to do in their turn. Whereas, if you're a veteran person playing a fighter or something, you're like, yeah, I roll up and do 2 attacks with my longsword, and then I'm going to use my bonus action to second wind, and you're like, that's the turn. But an inexperienced person playing a fighter might be like, ooh, I'm a fighter. Can I, like, disarm them with their weapon? And you're like, yes, there's not. D&D 5e24 doesn't really have good rules for this, but we can make something up. If that's how you want to do. If you're like, oh, I want to play a fighter, but I don't want them to kill people, so I'm going to try to focus on disarming them or having them submit, and be like, cool, yeah, you take some intimidation that'll help with that. Give you some advantages on some grapple checks, help you to disarm things. There are ways to help facilitate that fantasy with the rule set as well. Yeah, mind table etiquette, no phones, no side conversations, no eating into the mic. Now, I have a player in the current game that I run who completely runs the game off their phone. They use the D&D Beyond app on their phone, and that's the only thing they show up to with the game, at the game. They use that, and they use a notepad app to take notes in the game, which is fine. I think it's really the first person I've seen people run fully off of their phone before, but it's the only time I've seen somebody do it. It's the primary way that they play D&D, which is very interesting. It's not for me, for sure. Both the form factor is tiny, and but this is also the person who's asking me about, like, oh, I'm trying to figure out these things about my character. It's like, well, the D&D Beyond stuff's not always super good about telling you sort of the background information. So I had to be like, you can go to this website and it'll have more information about that stuff. And you can look it up. Have a little bit more in-depth and clear than just the blurbs that sometimes give you in D&D Beyond. Yeah, phones. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna lie. I have a lot of players who do texting around Discord and stuff, or just surfing the web. I do think we're at pretty much a point that tech is so pervasive that you're just not going to get around to that unless you just ban devices at your table, which, I'll be honest, I'm one of the few people that I know anymore that even use something like a paper character sheet at all, ever. And like to handwrite things, and that's just the way that I like to play the game. That's for me as a dungeon master and the player, is that D&D is a way for me to sort of techno cleanse myself, is to actually get away from devices and just kind of focus on the people who are in the room and things that are in my hands, and not focus on the screen. I get enough screen time in my other hobbies and my work. So that sometimes one of the nice things about D&D is I actually try to get a little bit away from screens. Even though I do use a digital notebook, I guess is the best way to say it. It's a remarkable tablet. I use which you can read on. It's kind of like using a Kindle to play D&D, and keep the character sheet on. It has a pen that you can write on, so it's got a stylus. Just because that became a little bit easier than using like actual paper sheets. I like it a little bit better, and I can keep all my characters together in a very slim kind of tablet. But I can't surf the internet or anything on it. I put the books. I have the books on it, and I can like look stuff up on the books, but it's a little tedious. But I'm happy to have Dungeon Masters make calls when I'm playing, or to make a call as Dungeon Master, because I feel like I know the rules and the design of the rules well enough to be able to do that. Pretty freewheeling that I don't need to look it up. Be gracious in or out of character. Win or lose, succeed or fail, keep a good attitude. Yeah, where do we want to put this? Show up on time. This, I'm gonna put this on like attendance. Or maybe we'll just put this under table. This will be like table manners. We're gonna change this. So show up on time is a good one. Also, hey, look, if you're just having a bad day or whatever, don't show up to D&D. Just cancel. It's okay. Just be like, um, you can say cancel if you're not in the right headspace. You know, I think some years ago I would have never conceived doing this. Nowadays, I'm like, if there've been a few occasions where I've canceled. I try not to cancel last minute though. I really hate canceling D&D last minute. It really sucks. But there have been times where I've been like, you know what, guys, I just don't think I can do it this week. They're pretty rare because I do really enjoy playing D&D, so I'm more likely to go play D&D than not play D&D, and I think it puts me in a better mood usually. But yeah, if you're not in the right headspace to play D&D, don't bring it down by trying to force it. It's okay to cancel if you're just like not feeling it this week or you got other stuff that's going on. It's okay. I'd rather you cancel as a player if I'm the DM and I'm running. If you just don't got it today, like you've had a bad day or whatever, you're in a foul mood, whatever's going on, you got other stuff that's preoccupying your mind that you're thinking about. It's fine. Take the day off, and we'll play without you because it's better. I feel like to play with a missing one person, but everybody's engaged, than having one person who's kind of bringing everything down, uh, kind of bringing the energy down of the game. So it's fine. Just cancel. We'll see you next week. Whatever. Not big. Not a big deal. I think that's a little bit better than being gracious, or and that will help you keep a good attitude. Learn from mistakes. Yeah, I guess so. I think that kind of comes from the rules. New character. Uh, help new players. Learn from your mistakes. Absolutely. Learn stuff. Like learn the game. Like I said, that playing. I wasn't. I don't feel like I was super frustrated by the person I played with for a long time who only played rogues and still didn't know how to play rogues, or really most of the game at all. And I was like, you've been playing D&D since like the 70s. How do you not know how the game works at this point? Now, obviously, the game's gone through a lot of changes, but I mean, there's like core fundamentals of the game. Even if going from third edition, you're like, still, you've been playing the game for like many years with the core D20 mechanic. How do you not know how to play the game? So yeah, learning from mistakes, like picking it up, continuing to learn the stuff, eventually getting that sort of rules literacy we talked about, knowing the rules, know your character, learn from your mistakes, and then we're going to put this down here. So that way you can get to a place where you can actually be helpful to new players, and you're not teaching them bad habits or teaching them wrong things, or making it seem like you've been playing the game for 10 years and you still don't know how a rogue works, and that's okay. That's not okay. You should know how your character works by now. Have fun, help others have fun. Yeah. I feel like if we have to, and this is the thing that come up. Well, the point of playing the game is to have fun. Well, I was like, yeah, it's a game. That's why you play games. So if you're playing a game and you're not having fun, uh, is there a game in which you could have fun? Sometimes it's just the people. Like the group has different play style than what you want. That's okay. You can go find other things. Like I think uh, I played with a bunch of metagreen power gaming groups pretty early in my career, and I got burned down on that pretty fast. So now at the point where I'm looking at something like Pathfinder 2E, and I'm like, oh, this is like a power gamer's feast. Like there's so much stuff I could do in here. And I can see that, and I can see all those rabbit trails to run down and follow for builds. But I'm also at the point in my life where it's just like I would not have that much fun with that kind of game. I enjoy other aspects of the game a lot more, and I like playing characters who don't have to be super awesome at everything all the time. I mean, like they can just be kind of okay at stuff, and have that be part of the story too. Is that they're just kind of okay at stuff. You get to a point where you move outside of if you're like me, and I think if you play long enough, you kind of get to that aspect where D&D's a lot of power fantasy, and then at some point you'll reach the saturation point of D&D power fantasy, and you're like, okay, yeah, the power fantasy is cool and everything, but like, there's only so many times I can play a high level character and kill God and do a full JRPG, where you, of course, kill God because you always kill God in the JRPG, and so at some point you're like, I just want something different. And that's what I'm thinking about, like when I'm thinking about the free RPG day back at things like Obojima and some of the other stuff, and be like, oh, I find that I actually, as a player and Dungeon Master, I like really low level games and where the player characters are actually not that far divorced from the average person, and they deal with very real problems of very sort of like common folk, uh, and where the distinction of what is a commoner and what is an adventurer are far enough apart where it's like, oh, you're definitely like a step up than the average person, but you're also so close to the community that you're ingratiated with it still, and you're not this, level 17 druid who is basically a demigod at this point. When you start getting into things like, oh, I can cast ninth level spells. I have a spell that just allows me to just like manifest my will upon the world with the wish spell. You're like, yeah, you're not really relatable anymore for a lot of people. So I like to play low, and that's one of the reasons that I have it. Um, yeah, but I do think there's something very odd in the hobby in which around playing a game where you have to remind people to have fun playing the game. Sometimes people say there's not a wrong way to play D&D, but then I'm like, sometimes there is. If you're not having fun playing the game, then you're not doing something right. And that might be the people you're playing with, that you might be the issue. It could be a lot of things. Let's go down to some DM habits, though. Ooh, yeah, first one. Be prepared. Where am I writing at? I'm writing in the wrong document. That's right. That's fine. You need to click into the document. Be prepared. So this is something, and this is usually my gripe with dungeon masters or game masters who say they're improv only. It's like, oh, I never prepare anything. I always do stuff off the cuff, and it always goes fantastic. As somebody who played for a long time with multiple DMs, a group with multiple DMs who were 100% improvisers, for the most part. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they did actually prepare things. I can tell you there is a significant difference in the quality of the game between whether they prepared something or not, with them preparing anything always being better than them having prepared nothing. That is across the board. Generic, yes, always better when they prepare. Undoubtedly, always better. It doesn't take a lot, but it is where I feel like it's actually not that hard to improvise an adventure. If you've been dungeon mastering for a while, like if I needed to sit down and create a session from scratch, like in the seat, I'm sitting down at the table, and I had to do this, and I had to run a one shot. Super easy to do, actually. It's really not that difficult to do. I'd be like, okay, I want to make sure. I would just make a couple notes to myself and be like, okay, I want to make sure that they kind of hit all the pillars. There's going to be probably at least 2 to 3 combats. There's going to be some exploration and investigation. There's going to be some social. I use that 3-2-1 pyramid form that I've used before. Like, okay, maybe there's going to be 3 fights. There's going to be 2 exploration investigation things, and 1 real like social RP kind of challenge or opportunity. And then that's kind of all I need, and I can kind of freewheel it from there. It's not actually that difficult if you've been DMing a while. It's really not too difficult to just come up with stuff off the cuff. But it's really hard to run a campaign that way, because if you're not taking notes, if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, and you're not having any forethought of what you're doing, everything kind of feels like Jackson Pollock just like paint splotches on the wall. the world does not feel very cohesive, and that has always been things that I dislike the most about only improvising dungeon masters, is that you can really tell. There would be things that I'm thinking about one dungeon master in particular that I played with, where it would be like he'd bring up something, this one-off thing. I'd take a note of it and be like, "Oh yeah, I definitely want to swing back on this. We're in the middle of a dungeon though." And then, 1 or 2 sessions later, bring it back up to the dungeon master, and they have completely forgotten about this, don't remember anything about it, and it's very clear they don't know what I'm talking about. And I'd be like, okay, I have to remind them, be like, we were in this place, we saw this thing, and I'm thinking about this one very specific incident in which we were in there, and there's like a star chart on the ceiling, and I'm like, oh, I want to know more about the star chart and why it's in here. And then the dungeon master doesn't actually have anything prepared for that, and it's like, okay, that's weird set dressing though. You spent a lot of time kind of showcasing that there was the star chart on the ceiling, and nothing in the dungeon we were in had anything to do with sort of celestials, or star maps, or the astral sea, or anything like that. So I'm bringing it back up because I feel like it should be. You spend a lot of time detailing it, and it's also just such a weird thing to be in the middle of a dungeon. And then it's very clear talking with them and be like, oh, you haven't prepared anything for this. And now this feels weird. It feels like, oh, it doesn't really matter what I focus on. There's no point in investing in the world because you're not investing in the world. You're not investing in the game. So why should I, as the player, also invest in it? And that's kind of where it comes down to me, is sort of preparation aspect. I think it's just also helpful. Be prepared. I'm going to put in here best prep is prep to improvise. Usually, I have sort of like I didn't know what they were going to do for the downtime activities when they just showed that thing, so I have no idea what they were coming to the table with. Some of them, they were good. The players got on to each other a little bit about like not putting their stuff in the Discord about like what they wanted to do during the downtime. It's like, well, how am I, the DM, supposed to know what we want to do if we don't tell him? It's like, it's okay, you guys don't actually have to tell me. I know what's in the town, so whatever you guys decide to do in the town, I can tell you where to go, whatever you're trying to do. So I'm not worried about what you guys decide to do in your downtime. I'm not worried about being able to improvise that. Because I know what's in the town, I do know what NPCs I have sort of in my back pocket that I can pull out to run with. I do know things that are happening. I have some secrets and clues that tell you about stuff that's coming up that you guys can run into and get. You can get a clue into early about that sort of stuff, and kind of do the world building that way, and kind of baby bird feed it, kind of leave a little trail for them to follow and learn that stuff. So, yeah, but that does take preparation. That would be very different if I didn't prepare the town at all and was like, oh yeah, we'll do whatever you want and blah, 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 blah. Then it feels like everything's really wishy-washy. At least it does to me. Active listening? This says listen actively. Pay close attention to what your players are saying and doing. It's their story too. So yeah, I'm going to change this because this really seems to be more like... Let's make the PCs the spotlight. Now, I'm breaking my own advice in this current campaign, and this is actually just more of a DM style thing. It's that because I focus on playing some lower level games and running lower level stuff, like I said, the adventures aren't too far divorced from the average person, and there are NPCs in the place that they're in who are just generally stronger than they are. So the PCs aren't always the spotlight, but they are the spotlight of their own story. So they are the spotlight of the game, even though they're maybe not the spotlights of this specific location. Like there are more, they're more recognizable like VIPs in the area, but they are gaining some notoriety as they grow through levels and do complete deeds and get to know people. Like people start to know who they are, even if that's through wanted posters. That's what we found out in our last session. But yeah, make the PCs the spotlight of your game. They shouldn't feel like they're an afterthought. And it's a lot of like, don't create a plot and then be like, oh, then try to like strong arm. That's where you kind of get into railroading territory about like forcing the player characters to do that, the players to go along a very specific series of events in which they don't really have any choice or agency in what's happening. Like, don't do that. Your plot is not more important than your friends at the table. Because at some point the game's going to be over, but presumably you still want your friends. So you kind of have to put them a little bit over your game. Yeah. Fair and consistent ruling. Yeah, you have to be fair and consistent in your ruling. And here they want it to be about favoritism. I think it's just you're going to have to make a lot of calls as Dungeon Master in any game that you play, any game that you run in, anyways. So one of the things that kind of I feel like often comes up, I feel like you have to be consistent in your rulings. If you rule something one way and then you're changing it every single time, every single session, it's hard for the player to manage player expectations because they don't know what to expect because the rules keep changing. So you want to be as fair as you can be, but you also want to be consistent when you're ruling the game because you're going to have to make a lot of rules judgments or a lot of rules calls. So try to be fair, explain why you're doing it that way. If somebody really tries to rules lawyer you or really argue about it, remember that you are the DM and you can shut them down. But again, just as you want your players to be respectful to you about their criticisms, also be respectful to the players. And now, if they stop being respectful, then you can shut it down. But try not to fire that first shot, I guess. Try not to... Getting in an argument with your players is not going to help most situations. It's in fact going to make things much worse. Yeah. I think this kind of goes down here, make the pieces spotlight the game. Encourage player creativity. I'm going to say encourage clever play. What you don't want to do is shut down players who are trying to come up with a creative solution. It's a fine line to walk, though, because there's shenanigans and then there's clever play. Like, in the last session, having one of my characters try to lasso an undead and hogtie them, essentially. They're trying to do the D&D equivalent of the snow speeder at in AT-AT in Star Wars from in Empire Strikes Back. We're like wrapping it up so it falls over. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'm not sure I'd call it super clever play, but it's like, yeah, you want to do it. There's a mechanical benefit to do it. Yeah, you can absolutely do it. You can hog tie. You can try to take this zombie alive. And I think the player character was like, the player was like, oh, well, I want to understand more about what's going on with these, so I'm going to try to keep this one alive. But the guards just stabbed it and killed it because they're like, it's an undead. What am I supposed to do? Talk to it? So remember that the NPCs also make brash actions in the world, and you're just hanging out with a monster, and they're like, no, I'm going to kill the monster. What are you doing? Being weirdly comfortable with this undead creature. So yeah, encourage clever play. You don't want to discourage people from having good ideas, because when you do that, oftentimes if you focus in specifically only on the way the rules are written and don't allow for a lot of extra stuff around the periphery, if you don't have that flexibility, what you'll run into is a situation where the game gets really stale and kind of boring. And oftentimes you see many dungeon masters, game masters online lament about like, oh, my players never try to do anything cool or interesting. They only do this thing. They only kind of like do the actions in the book. They only like they spend all their time looking at their character sheet and their ability list and don't think about any of the cool or clever things they could do. Yeah, that's probably because you're not doing a ton to encourage clever play, or you did a job of shutting it down probably early on. So they're like, well, I'm not going to try that again. So encourage it. So try to find ways to say yes when you can, even when it's something stupid like lassoing and hogtie undead. Yeah, you can do it. It's fine. Whatever. You accomplish what you're trying to do. I did kind of take the guy out of the fight. That's what you were trying to do, as well as trying to save him for later. You took him out of the fight, but unfortunately the guards were like, killed the undead because they're in the middle of a fight with undead. Also because I didn't want them to super hyper focus on that. Like I said, this was also a DM perspective being like, oh, they're trying to make the undead thing into a thing when really it's just a random encounter that I rolled. So I guys don't want you to read it too much into it. It's fine to read into it. It's just now is not the time to do that because I want this lead up to the festival. This is all supposed to be mostly relaxing stuff. It's just I wanted to make sure there was a little something something, and I ended up rolling a random encounter. Foster a safe and respectful table. Yeah, sure. I, Unfortunately, I feel like fostering a safe and respectful table is often a thing that gets kind of pushed onto a dungeon master and be like, oh, because you are the person who's in charge of the game, and sometimes the person whose home we're playing at, that means that you have to be in charge of all this other stuff. You have to be in charge of scheduling. You have to be in charge of food and snacks and drinks and making sure that like you have to play this weird social referee with your friends and be like, that's not, and making sure that like safety tools and it's like that is not just a DM thing. This foster safe and respectful table. Hey bud, that's also a player thing. We're actually just going to put this here. We're going to put voice concerns in a respectful way. Yeah, because that's also very much just something everybody at the table should be doing. Is trying to make it a more enjoyable atmosphere for everybody. Not much to say about that. I mean, we can go into like safety tools and session zeros and lines of veils and X cards and all that kind of stuff. Uh, Sometimes, hopefully, if you're running a home game, uh, these people are generally your friends that you're playing with, or family members, or somebody that generally you don't just know because of D&D. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you do. I'm often in that boat. Is often because I'm the person who's like, I want to hang out with these people specifically to play D&D. It doesn't mean that they're not my friends. It just means like this is what I like to do with my free time. So I want to make sure that I do the thing that I want to do with my free time, and then the people are part of that, are a big part of that as well. I keep things moving. Yeah. Uh, Good. I'm just gonna say strong pacing, or maybe focus. I don't know. I don't want to keep things moving. Uh, I guess. No, that's more writing advice, which is like enter a scene late and leave early. But that's gonna not translate super well, even though it's sort of the same thing. Is to keep things snappy. This is one of the things that I felt like I did not do a super great job in this last session. Is the trying to keep things snapping, trying to keep the pacing quick. Don't hang around on one scene too long. Don't spend too much time. Don't try to bog the session down. You want to try to make sure. Yeah, let's do it that way. Uh, Keep the games smooth and quick. Keep the games facing smooth and quick. Yeah, that's good. That's great DM habit. Be like, at some point, it's super. When we talk about sometimes fudging, and that's its own thing. People are kind of all across the spectrum on how they feel about things like fudging dice rolls or HP or stuff like that. It's like it's very rare, and players will sometimes complain about it. About it, and I get it as a player too. I don't super love fudging, but rarely are people upset when you just cut hit points away from the character from a monster. If you're like, it's been three rounds of combat, it's pretty clear the player characters are going to win at this point. I'm just going to go ahead and knock like 50% of this creature's HP off, remaining HP off, because it's like, look, they're going to win. It's fine. We've passed that point where the end result has become a certainty, and so rather than play out another like 3 rounds of combat just to get through the HP below this monster, we're just going to do one more round. Everybody will get their shots in, or probably one more round depending on what you get the HP to, and then we'll just get to it. Or at that point, be like, I'm going to try to have the monster run away, and either they succeed, or if they are not able to get away, then they'll just die. It's fine, just to try to keep things moving, because it really sucks to be stuck in a very long combat that you know you're going to win. That's the thing that I often find very frustrating as a player, and be like, yeah, it's clear we're going to win this combat. Nobody's using any more big resources because we know that we're going to win, so everybody's relying on cantrips and basic attacks. So let's just cut to the chase and get to the end spot. So keep the pacing smooth and quick. Don't focus too much stuff on that. I feel like with our shopping downtime stuff, I didn't do a super great job of this. This is always really hard to do. Again, like my group right now that I'm playing with, that I'm running for, they're not super cohesive, so they're still kind of trying to each do their own different thing, and that's fine. It's just that it then diverts the time from being like, we all get this time together to each person only gets like 25% of my attention if we do things individually. So trying to keep them together a little bit, and I talked about them before the session that we, try to help me with this, try to get there. Share the spotlight. Yeah. I think that just big PCs encourage clever play. Give everyone their moment. Try to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to kind of do their thing game that kind of gets their highlight. So let's talk about what kind of happened in the last session. I think the only person who didn't really get a super great time, and this is sometimes, I don't want to blame the player for this because it's not their fault, but I would say that they're not the greatest advocate for themselves, is I have the one player who's playing a fighter who's not always super, and probably because I think that they probably have one of the weakest backstories character-wise in social RP in general. So I think that they just don't advocate for their own space in the scene too much. But they are going to be one of the people who kicks off next session. They are going to go do some fighting stuff, so that should take care of itself a little bit. Try to make sure that they have their moment. But everybody else kind of was able to get moments during this. Good thing. So people learned about other people. He did get. Sorry, my fighter did get to learn about one of the other player characters. That was one of the things where it's like, these other people are doing this. They're having this conversation. We've got a couple of people who are just kind of sitting over here. You guys give me a perception check. I do that, and that's just trying to like keep everybody in the loop, trying to keep everybody, make sure everybody has their kind of moment. So they were able to learn. They learned something that nobody else knows about one of the other player characters right now. So they've got some of their own stuff going on. Some of that stuff's kind of backseated right now. Somewhat of their own making, but we'll get to that another time. It'll come out eventually. It's being very slow because they're not interacting with the thing that they need to interact with. Share the spotlight. Read the room. Yeah, reading the room. This is sort of like a man. How do you even put this in here? How do you put in read the room? So it's about adjusting pacing, tone, or challenge level based on how engaged or overwhelmed the players are. Yeah. I mean, this is such a, like, at the first level of dungeon mastering, like the lowest entry level of dungeon mastering, is just like understanding the game. The next level up is sort of being able to create your own adventures, run the adventures competently, do that things, being able to start off an adventure, get through the middle of it, end it, start another one, and getting the process of like actually running a game down. and how to build campaigns and all that stuff, and how to start to lace adventures together and do that stuff. And then you start hitting that next level of D&D, where this is almost more of a sociological thing, where you're like, oh, now I'm doing this thing where I'm actually doing something that's a little bit closer to like leading a conference or a workshop or something like that, where you're like, I'm paying attention to how the people in the room are reacting and taking reads on their energy and what they're paying attention, what are they leaning on and onto, who is the person, just like I was talking about, that I have two players over here that aren't interacting with the scene, so I'm going to give them something to interact with. That's a very much read the room and adjust the game kind of thing. Be like, okay, we haven't focused on these people for a little bit, so doing that. So there's like, once you're able to take the stuff that using up all your big brain RAM, all your memory, to focus on just the aspects of running the game. Once you get that, becomes more reflex muscle memory, for lack of a better word, as a dungeon master. Then you're able to start elevating your game to be like, now I'm paying attention to the people who are at the table and reading off of them and trying to adjust the game to match them. And that's such a more advanced dungeon master topic, but it's such a good habit to have, and there's no way to really get taught that. It's something you have to learn, and the only way you're going to have the ability to learn that is go through that process, through that layer cake of dungeon mastering, where you're like, I'm confident in my ability to run the game. I do not have to think about it very much. I am confident in what the adventure's about and what the scenery is. I've done my prep, right? And I've made my prep to improvise, so I know how to improvise on that. So when I have these moments, now I can spend my time looking at the people who are playing the game, what they're focusing in on, what they're leaning in, when are they leaning back, what do they seem frustrated with, are they getting bored, what can I give them to draw their excitement back up in, or to get them leaning back in on the game, and do that, and then look at the stuff that I prepped to improvise and take that and start throwing improvisation at them for them to feed off of. But that's such a higher level dungeon mastering thing. It's like you do not need to focus on that. If this is your first time and you're look at this list as a first time dungeon master or somebody who's maybe only been running for a little bit, don't worry about that. That will come later. If you continue to do it and you need to focus on the nuts and bolts of running the game first and being able to run the adventures and trying to get the campaign going. Then once you're doing that, now you can start focusing on the making the game more enjoyable for everybody there. Now that you know how the engine works, now you can really tune it really well. You can sports tune it essentially. There we go. I made another sort of weird sports analogy that this is not this is not the audience for that. Sorry. Yeah, and maybe PC building would be closer. You need to know the fundamentals of how to build a personal computer first, and know how to put all things together, how to do all that stuff. Then once you do that, now you understand how to upgrade it and get the most power out of it and overclock it and do stuff like that. But that's not what you learn first off. That's not important to focus on when you're first doing it. So we did that. I should spotlight, read the room. Stay flexible. Yeah, that's just the improvise thing. Be prepared. Yeah, I'm going to put in here, be flexible. It's leave gaps. Gaps. Space to fill. Just kind of looking at my prep from this last session and being like, here are the things I know about. I have a sheet that's here are the things that are in the town, so I know that. I know the NPCs, I know the locations, things I can go to and do. I know the things that I want to tell them about the upcoming festival. I know the things that I want to tell them about their player characters. This kind of going on. What I don't know, and where the big gap in that prep is I don't know what the players are going to want to do during the session. It's very amorphous, and that can be super overwhelming, especially for a new dungeon master. But I knew that they weren't going to run off and do an adventure right off. I had constructed their path. I pointed them in the right direction. Be like, this is a downtime activities time. We're going to do some shopping. We're going to do talking about people. You can talk to people about the stuff that you learned. We're not going to go super in depth, but you are able to do some of that stuff. And so, kind of set the guardrails up and then let them play within my player character playpen for babies, for my baby players. so they won't hurt themselves. So yeah, leaving gaps and then being able to improvise to fill that space. And that's part of just staying flexible. Part of that is also very related to that, so I'm just going to add it down here, is to... Um, actually, it's probably worth its own thing. Which is create challenges. Sorry, let's say obstacles. Create obstacles, not problems. And we'll say challenges, or... yeah, challenges is fine. Challenges / obstacles, but not problems. So what does that mean? So what's the difference there? So I've talked about this before, but in case you're not familiar with it, so the problem with problems is that if you create a problem has a solution. So when you only have one solution, the player characters have to do that one thing to do it, right? And that's, while it sounds fulfilling from the DM's perspective, oh, they just need to do this one simple thing. You know what that one simple thing is. Your players and their characters are not going to know what that one simple thing is. And that's why one of the things where I feel like people struggle with puzzles and stuff like that is like, because it's got one solution. You have to give me the one solution for it. But if you just provide an obstacle, something that's in their way, and then be confident in your players and their characters that they have the tools, they have the skills, they have the ingenuity to figure out how to get around the obstacle. And they can go over, under, around, or right through the obstacle. But if you give them if you set stuff in their path that challenges them, that is an obstacle in their progression, but don't provide us a singular solution, like it has to be done this way. Be like, here's something that's in your way. You tell me how you want to deal with it. That's the fun part about playing the game for me, both as a player and a dungeon master, is being like, okay, here's the thing, the situation. This kind of goes back up to player, which is actually not something we have in the player practice. There is clever play. So we're just gonna add this up here because it's not in here, and I think that's weird. Chase, look for clever play opportunities. I don't know the right wording that I want to use for this. Clever play. Let's say seek out clever play opportunities. It's a solution. Let's say that. A solution. Opportunities. So if you create those challenges and obstacles, you're not going to run into the thing where they talk about encouraging clever play. That's one of the things that encourages clever play. If you just create a challenge or an obstacle, it's sort of like in a video game where often there's sort of like the sim, not sim like SimCity, but immersive sim genre of games would be like, hey, here's the storyline and the way and the challenges that are in your path, but you can try to sneak, you can decide to be a big melee fighter, you can try to talk your way out of this. I think that's one of the design things that's really good in stuff like Baldur's Gate 3, is that there's a lot of opportunities for ways to come up with solutions that are not just, I hit it with my sword until it dies. So that there are other ways to do it. And then one of the things that I do as a player is I've also gotten to the point of being like, how often this is the where is it? I put up here. Help new players. And say this: get away with. How much can you get away with? So one of the things that I did start doing as a player is be like, D&D is very much a combat focused game, which is good, but it is what it is. So sometimes if you're a player like me who really likes the exploration investigation side, like that's the pillar where I really enjoy the game. Not that I don't enjoy combat or talking to NPCs, I like that stuff too. But that's the stuff that kind of like cooks my brain chemicals up real nice. So it's the part that I like a lot. So part of how much can I get away with is oftentimes like, can I not fight these monsters? Is there a way? Can I sneak around them? Can I buy them off? Can I intimidate them? Can I scare them away? What can I do? And it really changes the way that you play the game if you don't try to murder things in the game. If you kind of go out of your way to not kill things, if you're like, oh, well, I just knocked this guy out, uh, and then going beyond that and be like, what if I just don't try not to fight this guy? What if I try to sneak around him? What if I cast a spell on him and that makes him, friends? I can cast friends. Maybe I cast sleep. Maybe I do something else. Anything that there are other options that you can do. Be like, what if I just try not to get into fights? What if I play characters that have this sort of reverence for life? Like they will kill monsters. They're not pacifists. They're like, I'm not going to be the person who's often going to try to start the fight and going to try to kill somebody. And oftentimes playing a character who will let people go, who will intimidate them, who will just capture them, and then sometimes, like I said, show mercy, even if it comes to bite them in the butt, because sometimes that's just fun narratively to have the story swing back and be like, and remember that guy that you let go, and well, he's come back with his friends to beat up on you, or sometimes that character comes back and helps you. It's like, I remember the kindness you did me, so now I'm gonna pay it back to you. Kind of a karma, D&D karma kind of system. And I think if you have a pretty good DM and they see you show mercy to creatures, creatures will also show mercy to you if you treat them. You kind of give you get back what you give into the world kind of aspect. Yeah, this is in their sort of flexible. The yes and right, which really is just kind of four different things. Which is more like getting beyond the binary. Which is a good tool I feel like to use for rolling as well. So that's the so it's yes and you guys can't see it because it's gone down to the next week. Come on, there we go. So it's yes and that's one of them. Yes, but no, but no. I should probably put the comments in there. Even though technically you don't need them because those are conjunctions. That's right. We're not going to focus too much on the English grammatical brain. So, getting beyond the binary, try not to answer a ton of questions as yes or no. Sometimes that's all that makes sense. If they ask a question that there's nothing leading behind, you just go yep or no. That's not how that works. But when possible, these are good ways to also flavor dice rolls. So sometimes, like a good example is, say you're in the dungeon and you've reached a bottleneck portion of your dungeon that maybe you totally forgot about when you were making it, then you didn't realize this was a bottleneck point. And there's a locked door, and the rogue rolls to unlock the door, and they roll really low. They roll below the DC. Now you get to this very interesting point. Like you go, oh, maybe I shouldn't have called a roll through it. They have to get through this door, and now they failed it. Uh, but there's nothing that really stops them from just trying again. There was actually no consequence to the failure, so I probably shouldn't have had them roll. But what else could I say? So you could be like, uh, we could do some answers. So sometimes a low result is if you didn't want them to fail. So we'll just kind of, yeah, let me just give you an example with all of these. So you failed to get through this door. Maybe the door check's really easy. If I wanted to do a no and, I could immediately prompt like a wandering monster or something and be like you're struggling with luck is to provide some sort of consequence for action, assuming that this wasn't already trapped. And they already looked for traps and knew there wasn't a trap on the door. So you can't be like, and then a poison needle hits you. If they didn't check for traps, that could be the consequences. You could hit them with the poison needle trap if they didn't look for traps. But let's say, no, you didn't unlock the things, and you hear footsteps coming down the hallway in your direction. So now we're prompting a potential wandering monster encounter, and that's the consequence. To be like, okay, this thing's coming in fast. You can try to do another check, but if you do that and you don't pass it, you guys will definitely be stuck out in the hallway when these things come around the corner. Whenever these creatures are coming around the corner and see you, and they'll definitely see you. A no but situation could be like, no, you didn't unlock it, but it's not because your skill. It's because it seems like the lock mechanism is fully rusted, really like fully seized up. Like you can't unlock this thing. That's the issue, and that's sort of your no but. So you're gonna need to break the door down. So it's no, but you can break the door down. So that way you're now being like, there's no point for you to roll again because you're not going to get something that's going to be helpful for you. So yes, but yeah, you're able to unlock the door, but again, we could have the wandering monsters come. We could be like, but you make a whole bunch of noise doing it, and now you're drawing attention. You hear things moving on the other side of the door and towards in your direction, or you've alerted them, and now they're going to get a surprise round on you because you made a whole bunch of noise trying to opening the door. So all that kind of stuff. And then we can go yes and. So that's hard to do a little. It's a little bit hard to do a failure with that. Um, but you could just be like the door's really loose, and so yes and before you're able to prepare, you unlock the door, but you kind of fumble with the handle, and maybe it just opens. You accidentally knock it open. And, I mean, a little silly, but be like so that way they don't get time to prepare to go into the room. They're just like, yep, and the door is open, and you and the monsters lock eyes. Roll for initiative. You could do something like that. So that's just kind of getting beyond the binary of being like, yes, you unlock the door, and then be like, now the player has to figure out what to do next, or no, you didn't unlock the door. Like, okay, can I just try again? Or and that's the consequence of the failure thing. But be like, oh, I didn't unlock the door. What should we do now? I guess we try to break it down, or use a knock spell on it or something. But it's trying to get away from just those binaries that can be sort of a conversation ender instead of trying to prompt the conversation by using that conjunction, that and or but, to continue the conversation forward, to keep things moving. Talk about that pacing aspect. This is very much the pacing, smooth and quick aspect. Trying to keep things moving. So that's it. This one down here is know the rules, but don't be a slave to them. Use the rules as a tool, not a cage. Story and fun take priority. Yeah, I think that's. I think that just kind of goes with fair and consistent ruling. Uh, and I think that's just kind of replace unfun rules. Or we'll put we'll just write it out. I was just gonna say raw. It was as written. So yeah, try to be fair and consistent in your rulings, but also like don't be a fan. You don't have to always have to follow the rules. If the rules are not fun, like if I had followed the thing and be like, oh well, the spell says it has to be a weapon attack, and these are zombies and they don't have weapons. They're just doing unarmed strikes on you. So because they don't technically they just have hands. They don't have natural. They don't even have natural weapons like claws. So this spell's not going to work. Be like, no, it still works. That would be a silly way to interpret that. That's not the rules as written. You know, I like to focus on the rules as intended, and understanding the why rules. Because that's really helpful. Understanding the design, like why are things this way? Like you might go, why are there encumbrance rules? Nobody really likes to. I don't want to say nobody. Most people don't like to play with encumbrance rules in D&D. So why are there encumbrance rules? Well, why are there? There are ways to do that. Maybe that's because most people get around that. They're like, we don't use encumbrance, and we give you a bag of holding, so you always have like basically an endless inventory. But then you look at a lot of games, like whether that's Baldur's Gate 3, or uh, some old like things like which one is it that has the grid system? Is that Resident Evil? Like inventory grids, like inventories that have grid systems, like video games will either have weight limits or grid systems. So you have to make choices about you can't carry everything with you, or doing so gives you the old Skyrim, gives you the old just like you move at a snail's pace if you try to take more than your encumbrance rating. And like, okay, why do you do that? Maybe it's so the player characters don't try to steal everything that's not nailed down. It could be maybe you want to focus in more of that aspect where the resource management aspect be like there is only a finite amount of stuff that you can take with you on adventuring. So each thing that you choose to take with you has to be a very conscious choice and reason that you're taking it with you. Start looking at things like outdoor camping, like that sort of gear stuff, which is a big rabbit hole you can get into really quickly. I have certainly before. And oftentimes in stuff like that, you want to look at things that serve multifunction use, so you get more bang for your buck. So that's a really nice way to bring in things like the +1 any tool instead of being, and then have situation and be like, what is the situation in adventure you might want to shovel in? We don't think about that stuff, but you could look at adventuring gear and be like, what is a specific situation in which this piece of adventuring gear that's on this very specific list of things to take with you would be incredibly useful, would be the tool for the job. And you look at that and you'd be like, okay, shovel, like in the adventure I just ran, they had to basically excavate part of a tunnel that had been collapsed in. That takes tools. So they didn't have tools with them, but they were able to get tools from the prospector's cave that was nearby. So they have, and I think the fighter still has a pick with them. I think, or maybe they dropped it in the dungeon. One of the two. Where they have like, all right, we go get the picks and the shovels, and we cleared out the passageway because the passageway was so small that only characters of small size could get through it, and we don't have any small size characters in this current party, so nobody was able to get through it. So they had to open up the tunnel a little bit. But just, yeah, simple stuff like that. So knowing the rules, and more importantly, that kind of the design behind the rules, why for the rules. Be transparent when needed. Yeah. Uh, we're going with this. I think this is its own thing. I'm gonna put it as its own thing. I think. No, you know what? We'll put it under pieces smooth quick. This is actually a pretty good one for going under here. And that's to be transparent. They say be transparent when needed. Explain decisions, house rules, or retcons clearly and honestly. Yeah. It's perfectly. This is something. If you're not doing it, you should be doing it as a dungeon master, which is to go above the table, and by that we mean like step out of like the narrative and be like, look at the people table, just like I did. Was talking about doing in the sessions. Like I want you guys to help me stick together more in the session, so it doesn't take forever. So I need you guys to kind of like go and do things together instead of each individually splitting up to do your own thing, because that makes the game take way longer and less stuff will get accomplished doing that. Uh, and that's okay to just like go above the board and be like, let's say above board. To like talk as the dungeon master to the players instead of characters within the world to the player characters. It will help you a lot if you do that. If to set up expectations, and which is maybe a better way to say that. going to say set and confirm expectations. This is something, like I said, I've been listening to NADPod. That's not another D&D podcast. If you're listening for it, want to check it out. Been around for a while. But it's something that Brian Murphy, who's the primary DM, does very well. Is like, hey, we're gonna fight. He likes to run fights that have a bunch of like terrain and other stuff that's kind of going on in it, which can be very hard to do in an audio-only podcast if they don't do this. But this is also super helpful for the players at the table. Be like, hey, here's what's going on in the battlefield, just as a quick synopsis. What was the one they did? It was like, oh, there's this pit, and at the bottom of the pit is a quicksand. When you fall in the quicksand, we'll roll a d4. That'll determine how many feet down in the quicksand you go while you're doing it. So everybody's on the same page about what's going on there, and now we'll go into the combat. So that way you can kind of set up the rules for the encounter. You set up the expectations for what's going on. So that can be extremely helpful to be clear and concise with explaining what's happening. Even if that's sometimes it has to take you above the game to do that. It will help you a lot. Elevate the player's stories. Integrate their character backstories, goals, and growth into larger narrative. Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of playing the game. I guess that goes under like give everyone their moment. Yeah, invest in PC backstories and goals. This makes me think about the last campaign with the Dungeon Master I'm playing with in that group. And in the last campaign, my character's backstory didn't really come up basically at all until the very end. And even then, it wasn't really super incorporated. I did feel a little let down by that. He's turned around and it's had a lot more integration with like my current character in their current campaigns backstory and what's going on with him there, which is funny because I think I wrote even less for his backstory than the first one. The first one I wrote was a little bit longer. I wrote the backstory, which I think was maybe 2 pages, page and a half. And it was mainly long because I was writing it as a sort of a first-person kind of journal entry style. But the second one, I was like, oh, I invested a whole bunch in that first campaign with my player character, so I don't necessarily want to waste all that time and set up those expectations for myself in the second game. So I'm actually going to like pull back a little bit on it and just kind of do the nuts and bolts, and I'll have some ideas about kind of what's going on with that. And that's been a lot more successful. But his stuff's actually just come up a lot more. I think the DM is doing a much better job about incorporating each player character's background, which is not something that was really a focus in the first campaign we ran, but there's a much larger focus in this new campaign. It's going really well, and it's very enjoyable. It is difficult to do, though. Yeah, let's, right then. I lost my place. Where was I? Where was I? No! Foster, make PCs spotlight. There we go. And kind of tie them personally to plot. That's it. Which may or may not have anything to do with their backstories in this. Be a fan of the players, yeah. Yeah, I think I'm going to change how this is worded a little bit. So I think that's, be a fan of the players is up here. I think that's the bigger heading. And make the PCs the spotlight. Take out this last part. Make the PCs the spotlight. Something that comes with being a fan of the players. Yeah, I'm going to say make the PCs the focus. They are center stage in their own narrative. They are the main characters of this adventure, of the game that you're playing. So you want to make sure that they feel like they are the center of attention. Alright, yeah, there's nothing much to say about that. Yeah, that's good. It's very maybe not DMing 101, but definitely DMing 201. Be like 101's really like I think about that as like the nuts and bolts of running a game. But then it's like, yeah, obviously they're center stage of the story. You can't play D&D without the player characters, so you do have to have them in there, else you are telling a story. But you also want them to be sort of the central focus of that story. But they are. It's weird because they're also the central focus of their own story, which means that you can do things like the Elder Scrolls Oblivion, where the main character, if for reasons you haven't played Oblivion or read Oblivion, the new Oblivion update, is that the main character in Oblivion is not the Dovahkiin of Skyrim. You are just kind of a guy, and there's actually a different NPC who it is really their story, and you're just sort of like helping them. You are part of a larger cast. You're like a side character in this different, more impressive narrative that's going on. But it is funny. But your player character is very much the main character of their own story. But it doesn't mean that it has to be the largest and most impactful story that's happening that they're part of. I feel like I'm not doing a very good job of explaining this. If you've never played Oblivion all the way through and beat it, or at least gotten to the end of it, I suggest go check out like a YouTube video talking about the, the plot, I guess, of Oblivion, and that'll give you a better insight as to what I'm talking about. If you got 5-10 minutes to spare, go check that out. I don't have a specific YouTube channel off the top of my head that deals with it, but you can find one for sure, especially with the remake. Keep notes. Yeah, obviously, yeah. Be prepared. I'll just put it up here. Take notes. One of the things that I talked about is I try to make a session recap as quickly as I can. Sometimes that's right after a session ends. Sometimes that's, as a dungeon master, that is the next day. Like I did my notes for yesterday's game after the game yesterday, which is generally what I do. Generally, I come home after the game, even though it is generally quite late when that happens. But I do sit down and just knock it out real quick. It doesn't take that much time. Just because while it's fresh in my mind, I want to write it down. And then writing it down helps me think about the things that happened. And then I usually wait a day or two and then start thinking about, just let things kind of percolate in the back of the brain, think about it a little bit. And then as we get closer, start thinking about, okay, now it starts leading to my prep for the next session. Okay, there was this stuff that happened there. I want to make sure that these things from the last session get addressed in this upcoming session. And it just helps me, and then I already have the notes, and then I can always go back and refer to them. Because I wrote them when they were fresh, and there's not going to be too many gaps in them. Ooh, respect time limits. That's a big one. That's kind of an everybody thing, but it's primarily a Dungeon Master thing. Yeah, let's just. It means starting and ending on time. Again, why it's so important that as a player you show up on time, so that way we can start on time and that way we can end on time. Yeah, I'm lucky, as in the place I'm running right now. There is a clock because I don't wear a watch and I try not to keep my phone out while I'm playing. But there is, I can see the microwave if I look to my left from where I sit when I'm running a game. So I turn to the left, and oftentimes, more than once, somebody's asked me, "What are you looking at?" I'm like, "What are you looking for?" Because I'm looking at the kitchen, and they're like, "Oh, can I get you something?" I'm like, "No, I'm just looking at the time." Knowing that I generally want to end around 10:30, usually in their games at night. So I'm like, this is the time that I want to end at. So I'm throughout our session as we're playing, I'm looking at the clock occasionally and being like, okay, how many more scenes do I think I can get? Can I get one more good scene? Where do I want to try to end this? Where do I need to start looking at wrapping this up? and try to end them not necessarily on always on a cliffhanger, but with an idea of what's going to happen next, or figure out what's going to happen next if I don't know what it is. I need them to make a decision about what they're going to do next. But yeah, respect the time limits. It's not fun to have to play an extra long session if you're not expecting it. Stay calm and patient. Okay. I don't know about that one. Fair and consistent rulings. I think this stuff kind of falls. Safe and respectful table. We can put it under that. I guess calm and patient. I don't know. I don't really like that wording. Especially when tensions rise or players disagree. Set a steady example. Yeah, so. That makes it seem like it's not okay to get upset. And like you can get upset, that's fine. So I don't know. I feel like that just kind of goes with safe and respectful table. Which again doesn't. It's not just a DM thing. Like everybody should stay calm and patient in a game. I feel like everybody should not be trying to escalate things that are happening at the table. So I'm actually not going to put that in. I'm good. Just use feedback wisely. Yeah, I don't think we have anything in here. So be prepared. Be a fan of the players. Fair and consistent rulings. Yeah, we'll just put it down here. Ask for feedback. Ask for feedback and use it. Yeah, so it's pretty easy to ask for feedback. Like I said, I use the questions, comments, and concerns. That's from D6 Mafia. That's the when I heard that phrase. It's super easy to remember. I just know every time I close it out, it just becomes rhetoric. It's just like in your head, bounced around muscle memory style. You end the session, you go, all right, questions, comments, concerns, things you like, things you didn't like, things you want to see more of in the game, things you want to see less of in the game. And that's just the call for feedback at the table that I always try to use. Don't be afraid. Most of the time, you're not going to get anything that's particularly useful feedback. Sometimes people don't want to bring up feedback because maybe they have some criticism or they want something specific, or it's something about their player character that they haven't shared with the rest of the group yet, and so they want to keep it a little secrety still. So I also try to remember, okay, thanks, yeah, if anything comes up during the week, just send me a message or whatever, and we can talk about it. So, because sometimes it's easier for people to give you that feedback separately, or they want to have a discussion separately, not in front of people. But don't feel like it's bad if you don't get feedback. 90% of the time, you're not going to get any feedback that's of note. Sometimes the feedback's just like, oh, I really enjoyed the session. Okay. Helpful to know what you enjoyed about the session. Oh, I really liked being able to play this other character, or kind of play the NPC, or whatever. You can do that. That's a little hard. I've talked about how I had a player who really enjoyed that, but I think that's hard to do. The more that I try to think about opportunities to use that in the game, to let them step in and play an NPC, it's weird because it's then I still have to tell you about information in the world that you don't know. So at that point, we're making a 3-person process instead of a 2-person process, which just makes things slower. It's not because I don't want to do it, it's because it's going to slow down the game even more. And sometimes that just doesn't make sense. So instead, I have them do things like they'll roll for the NPCs sometimes. I'll have people roll for the NPCs if they're not in the scene. It's sort of the best I can do with that. But yeah, if somebody actually gives you feedback, use it. This says wisely. Yeah. I think you're just gonna have to figure out what feedback is useful or not. Try to incorporate it though, or if it's not something you want to add to your game, try to understand why the player wants that, what the issue is they're having, and see if there's maybe something else you can do to appease them or to ameliorate that issue in some sort of way, even if it's not like um, exactly what they wanted, if that makes sense. Make everyone feel included. Yeah, I mean that kind of comes with fair, foster safe and respectful table, and but it's also like making sure that give everyone their moment too. Yeah, it'd be like because it's more than spotlight. It's making sure that I'm gonna say ensure all voices at the table are heard. So one of the things you do as a dungeon master would be like, okay, I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to give some input about stuff. Everybody has an opportunity to say their piece, and everybody will hear it. And what you don't want is having like one player. Sometimes one player with a strong personality can sort of like bowl over even an entire group or hit loggerheads with another strong personality of the group. And if you have other people who are a little bit more passive players, sometimes you have to coax them and be like, specifically, what are you thinking about in this moment? Or be like, uh, player character A wants to do this thing, player character C wants to do this thing, player character B, what do you want to do in this situation? What are your feelings in this situation? Sometimes you have to put the focus specifically on them, and you do that by reiterating that you understand the focus of the other two, and then pushing towards the third person and be like, what is it? What are your feelings about this? Tell me how, like, how your player character is interpreting the scene or whatever it is. And then the last one says, have fun and enjoy the game too. Yeah. This is the one that I thought would be silly to put under the player's habits when, like, yeah, we're a game, we're here to play fun, to have fun playing the game. But it's something you do have to tell DM something. It does not have to be. If playing the game is not something you're looking forward to, then you got to change something about the game. Either you need to stop being the dungeon master if you're not having fun running the game, or figure out how to find your fun within it. And just put that down as find your fun. So sometimes that can be prep. Like if you enjoy world building, world build. That's fun. I like to consider world building as like this own side game of the D&D game that I get to play, where I get to make up all the weird stuff my friends can run into, all that stuff. So it's my own sort of thing, and understanding sort of like the mechanics of the world and how different pieces of the world kind of all fit together. So find your fun in it, and if you're not having fun, so find your fun. If you're not having fun, change it. So if you're like, oh well, my player characters aren't really, you know, doing the things that I want them to do or focusing on the things that I want them to do, you need to find a way to, can you have fun in the things that they are doing? How can you make that thing fun? Can you lean more into the things that are happening that your players want to do and have more fun doing those things? Or maybe it's time to stop running the game, and that doesn't necessarily mean permanently. It doesn't mean just abandon the campaign, but you might be getting a little burned out. Maybe you've been running for a while and you'd be like, actually, I want to take a quick break. Is somebody cool running like a one shot or a couple of one shots while I sort of recharge and give me an opportunity to jump in and play a player for a minute and sort of recharge my DM batteries? Most groups will agree to that. They'll be like, yeah, sure. If you have, especially, ideally, you want more than one dungeon master or game master in your group. In the best case scenario, what you really want is everybody who takes a turn behind the screen. Like everybody does some form of dungeon mastering and game mastering, which is good just for learning the rules. It's good for understanding the other side of the screen. And once you're a dungeon master, it really highlights some of the the bad tendencies players have sometimes, or the things that the dungeon master hurdles that dungeon masters have to jump over to ensure that the game works the way they wanted it, works the way that it should, so it's enjoyable for everybody. It gives you a lot more context, so I think that everybody should not just like run D&D one time. I think you should make a habit of running D&D, even if you only do one shots, even if you only do like I said, the giving your DM a break, or when somebody doesn't show up, you just have a one shot that you've learned and you have in your back pocket, and you're like, hey, we can play this next week, or whenever you play. Because like I'll run it. It's like anybody can run 3 hours of D&D. It's really does not take a whole lot. There are a ton of great one shots online that you can pick up and run them. So do your dungeon master a favor and shoulder a little bit of that DM burden, and it will show you just how much work that they are doing inside the table, away from the table, and how much that they are trying to ensure that you and all the rest of your friends have a good time. But I think that's it for this one, and that was our lovely list of some good player habits. Mind your manners at the table, pay attention for goodness sakes, know the rules, but defer to the DM for their rulings. You want to make sure that you're sharing the spotlight with everybody else there. Use that ask intention, wait for a roll call kind of framework will really help you out both as a player and the dungeon master. Keep your meta knowledge separate from what's going on in game, which sometimes we all need a little reminder on. Foster a safe and respectful table, because it's not just something the DM should be doing, it's something we should all be doing. You should seek out clever play and solution opportunities, get beyond just what's on your character sheet, get out there, really look at things that you can do, opportunities. Lean into things that you're not good at. It's okay to be like, I don't have any charisma, but I mean, your player character still goes through a normal day, still talks to people. If we assume in the real world that we all have commoner style stats, or pretty close to that, you talk and try to convince people about stuff all the time. Why would your player character not try to use charisma-based social skills? They would absolutely. They might not be the greatest at doing it, but they're probably okay at it. They're probably better than you think they are. And on the DM habits, we have be prepared, which I think is incredibly important, even if you're a highly improvising style DM. It's always better to prepare. Even if that's the case, focus all your prep work on preparing yourself to improvise, so that way you're not always pulling it completely out of your butt. It makes a ton of difference. Trust me. You might think that it's not from your perspective, but as a player who's played with multiple DMs like that, it absolutely makes a big difference, especially for an ongoing campaign. Be a fan of the players and the PCs. Yeah, they're there to have fun. You're there to have fun. It's their story. Make sure that they're the center part of their own story, even if it may not be the be all end all. It doesn't always have to be the JRPG we kill God kind of thing. It can just be a thing that's happening in the world. It doesn't even have to be the primary thing that's happening in the world. It just has to be interesting enough and the focus of the player characters. It is a story among many. Big of stories, big and small. Make sure that you're doing fair and consistent ruling. Pretty straightforward. Foster a safe and respectful table. Again, that should be an everybody thing, but it is helpful. One of the things that you can do is help to ensure that all voices at the table are heard. Make sure that everybody has an opportunity to say their piece. Keep the game's pacing smooth and quick. Yeah, keep things moving. Absolutely. Read the room and adjust the game. That's more of, like I said, more of an advanced dungeon master thing to do. So this one is that don't focus on that in the beginning, but once you get the rules of the game down and know how to roll adventures, you know how to run the game, you know how to make adventures, and are putting your campaign together, start reaching that next level where a lot of that stuff becomes automatic as far as running the game. Now you can focus more on reading the room, looking at the individual players, and kind of focusing in on their stuff. Create challenges and obstacles, not problems. That's a big one. So problems have solutions, which means there's only one way to deal with them. If you create an obstacle, something that's just in the way, and then let your players be creative in the ways that they try to overcome those challenges, either by going through, over, under, or around. And that helps promote that clever play stuff, if you want to see that more in your game. Getting beyond the binary of yes and no, make sure that you're using the yes and, yes buts, and no ands in their kind of situations. So we had our little example. Respect the player's time. Yeah, Starting is kind of depends on when everybody gets there, but ending, always try to end on time if you can. It's okay to go over a little bit, but try to keep a hawk's eye on the tie. And start looking at a specific place to end the game before it's that time. Ask for feedback after sessions and use it when you do get good insights. But always take any feedback you give with a pinch of salt. It has to pass the sniff test. Sometimes things are not right for the game that you're trying to run. But if you have a player that's having some sort of frustration or issue with the game, look at alternative solutions and work with them on those sort of things. You don't have to give them what they want, but you do want to try to find some middle ground. If you have a good reason to not give them what they want. And the last one, find your fun. As Dungeon Master, it is very much a labor of love making and running the game sometimes. If you're not having fun, if you don't like prepping, find ways that make the prep as minimally invasive as you want. If you don't like aspects about running the game, try to find things about the game that you do enjoy running and focus more in on that and pivot stuff in the campaign and in the game world and adventures. Do that stuff. Change the things you don't find are fun, make them more fun. Maybe that's with a house rule, maybe it's rules that's written that you want to change up. Do that stuff. And if you're not having fun in the game, you may just be burned out. It's okay to take a couple sessions off. Ask somebody else to run a one-shot. Try not to get to a point where it's just like, I'm not having fun running the game, so we're just going to let the campaign die. Take a break, but when you take a break, that doesn't mean don't work on the campaign. It just means you don't have to do the session prep aspect. You're giving yourself the space to kind of focus in on the game and find your fun in it again. So when it's not something that you have to, like in my case, I'm running a weekly game, week after week, prep for session after session after session after session. If you're not finding that fun, take a break from it. Take a couple weeks. That gives you a couple weeks, doubles your time. Doesn't mean don't work on it at all, though. Think about, okay, what was the things I'm not having fun? Trying to look back at your notes. This wasn't fun. This is things I want to change, and start focusing on that for the next session. But yeah, that's pretty much everything, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me. Hopefully you found some of these manners and habits of best ones. We didn't really get through the worst ones. There's a lot more, but we did talk about some of the worst habits. They're pretty much the antithesis of the good habits. So, kind of a 2-for-1 there. We talked about some bad stuff. We talked about some good stuff. If you enjoyed that, we've got more videos about this kind of stuff. If you want to see more prep stuff, we've got that. There's more stuff over on Fiend.com, website. We've got a bunch of articles on it, a bunch of blog posts. If you want to look at more stuff like this about how to run the game and be a better player and stuff like that. And I think that's it. There's the coffee, the ko-fi.com/RedDragonFiend if you want to throw me a few dollars. There's also the Drive-Thru RPG store if you want to pick up some pay-what-you-want resources. That's it for me. Thanks for hanging out, guys. And I'll see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.